BMMC, and of course the Armed Forces of the Philippines, saka yung General Headquarters, AFP and AP-wide service support units. Now, let us hear from your, let's see your presentation, Secretary Lorenzana. By the way, before that, I'd like to acknowledge the presence of my colleagues who are attending virtually. Senator, of course, Senator Amy Marcos. Good morning, ma'am. And Senator Risa Ontiveros. Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning, Chair.
Please proceed.
Good morning, sir. And good morning, committee members. To the chairperson of the Senate Committee on Finance, the Honorable Subcommittee, Vice Chairperson on Finance, Senator Pampilo Lacson, and other senators in attendance, I am honored to present the budget proposal of the Department of National Defense. Sir, I will dispense with the mandate in trust because we know that already.
Let's go direct to the budget
Yes, sir.
issues.
I'll go direct to the presentation, sir. For 2021, to attain the desired level of support to force employers in the prescribed readiness condition, the Philippine Army targets to maintain 240 tactical battalions and 86 ready reserve battalions, with 83 and 68% operational readiness, respectively. It also aims to achieve 90% effective strength of tactical battalions that can be mobilized within 1 hour as dictated by higher authorities. The Philippine Air Force, on the other hand, aims to provide 100% support of its tactical operations group to the unified commands. To achieve this, the Air Force shall maintain 173 various types of aircraft in its inventory and respond to 90% of its flight-directed mission within 1 hour and achieve 100% of its target flying hours. Similarly, for the Philippine Navy, it aims to provide all of its naval units to the unified commands. To attain this, it shall deploy and sustain 109 of its units for utilization, prepare 34 units for deployment, and sustain 137 force-level support service units. The GHQ, AFP, shall deliver its organizational outcome of protecting the sovereignty of the state and the Filipino people through its 3 programs, namely Joint Force Planning, Joint Force Operations, and Joint Force Capability. For the Joint Force Planning Sub-Program, the HQ commits to formulate, adopt, and issue 138 military plans and policies. Under the Joint Force Operations Sub-Program, it shall conduct 140 bilateral and multilateral engagements. Chair, may I now present the performance targets of the DND civilian bureaus for 2021. The DND proper, or the Office of the Secretary, commits to accomplish 100% of its targets based on DND proper policies, and 80% of its policies and strategies accepted by the President and the Cabinet. To attain this, DND proper shall develop 90 key document products in accordance with the implementation of the Defense System of Management, DZOM. The government arsenal. Meanwhile, in order to achieve 100% supportability of AFP small arms ammunition requirements for 2 basic loads, the government arsenal shall continue to manufacture 40 million rounds of small arms ammo with a 98% acceptance rate of its manufactured output based on standards. The Office of aims to improve the resilience of communities to disasters through its three sub-program, namely civil defense enhancement, disaster risk reduction management, and three disaster management operations. In DCP, the National Defense College of the Philippines is responsible for the capacity improvement of defense and security leaders. For 2021, it commits to produce 20 research papers, 10 publications on defense and security policy studies. It shall likewise continue to conduct the Master in National Security Administration course with 65 enrollees and graduates. And recently, sir, it started the online course of EMNSA. For the PVAO, for the Philippine Veterans Affairs Office, its goals are to empower Filipino veterans and to demonstrate the Filipino people's appreciation and gratitude to the veterans through its three programs: the Veterans Welfare and Benefits Administration Program, the Veterans Affairs Management Program, and the Veterans Memorial and Historical Preservation Program. For the Veterans Memorial Medical Center, its primary responsibility is to deliver quality health care services to veterans and their dependents. To support this in 2021, the VMMC shall provide healthcare services to veterans and their dependents, categorized by ensuring the proper treatment of 11,000 inpatients and 195,000 outpatients. DND budget proposal for fiscal year 2021. Based on the National Expenditure Program, the Defense Department is allocated a total budget of 283.26 billion pesos, of which 208.71 billion is for regular fund. The regular fund is distributed as follows: 122.12 billion or 43% for personnel services, 49 billion or 17% for maintenance and other operating expenses, MOOE, and 37.57 billion or 13% for capital outlay. The allocation for veterans and AFP pensioners, which is under the Pension and Gratuity Fund, is 74.5 billion pesos or 26% of the total budget proposal. Compared to the DND budget for this year, 2020, our fiscal year 2021 budget proposal is higher by 8.85% or 16.96 billion pesos. The variances for each expense class is as shown: personnel services with an additional 2.4 billion pesos, MOOE with an increase of 7.67 billion, and capital outlay with an increase of 6.89 billion pesos. Distribution of our budget structure. The distribution of the regular allocation based on the prescribed budget structure and how it compares to the fiscal year 2020 budget is shown as follows. Operations increased by 10.06%, while general administration and support, what we call GAS, decreased by 3.07%. For pensions, which included under the Pension Gratuity Fund of the expenditure program, total requirement for AFP retirees increased by 8.2%, equivalent to 4.85 billion pesos, to cover the pension requirement of 140,510 military pensioners. On the other hand, the allocation for veterans is the same level from the 2020 GAA, to include the implementation of RA 1164 or the increase in old age pension of World War II Korean and Vietnam veterans pensioners from 5,000 to 20,000 pesos. Distribution by program. This slide shows how the DND budget proposal is distributed to DND line agencies under the regular fund. The share of the armed forces of the Philippines is 203.26 billion pesos, posting a 9.3 increase from the current year's budget. Meanwhile, the allocation for civilian agencies totals 5.44 billion pesos, which is up 5.2% lower than the 2020 appropriations. Significant features. I shall now present the significant features of our budget proposal for 2021. The personal services allocation shall support a staffing summary of our line agencies composed of 150,741 uniformed military personnel, 12,480 civilian employees, and 69,938 CAFGO elements. The significant increase in personnel services of 2.4 billion pesos can be attributed to the following: requirements of filling up of positions, second tranche of the salary increase for the civilian personnel authorized under Republic Act 11466, terminal leave and retirement gratuity benefits, and other personnel services adjustment. On the other hand, the net increase in maintenance and other operating expenses, or MOOE, is 7.67 billion pesos. This was a result of total increases of 11.74 billion pesos, less the one-time projects implemented in 2020 amounting to 4 billion. The next slide shows a summary of increases under MOOE. The 2021 budget proposal includes MOOE for the following projects and activities: 3.91 billion for the expansion of for existing programs, activities, and projects, 2.4 billion for sustainment of units, 2.24 billion for the MOOE requirements of equipment acquired as part of the capability upgrade program and capital outlay funds projects. 969.7 million pesos due to inflationary effects on inflation indexed items. 569.25 million for additional fund for ammunitions. 386.7 million for quick response fund for the OCD. 48.7 million for requirements for additional troops. 48.40 million for ICT MOOE requirements of MITHI. And lastly, 1.1 billion for COVID-19 related programs projects. On capital outlay, there is a net increase of 6.89 billion pesos. This was a result of increases of 11.6 billion and the 2020 implemented programs and projects amounting to 4.76 billion that were factored out. The 2021 budget proposal includes capital outlay for the new or expanded projects of the department as follows: 8 billion for the restoration of discontinued AFP modernization program. These were discontinued this year, sir, to be used for the COVID fund. 1.61 billion for the expansion of existing programs, activities, and projects. 850.7 million for the mobility requirements. 517 million to support the construction and enhancement of base and base support facilities. 288.71 million for the sustainment of units. 264.82 million for the hardware requirement for MITHI projects. 113.3 million for the quick response fund, and 440,000 for COVID-19 related program projects. Where I just presented the 283.26 billion peso budget proposal of the Defense Department for fiscal year 2021 and its significant features. There is rest assured that all of us in the department and the AFP shall continue to pursue our mandate and achieve our goals with more vigor to ensure the stable national security environment conducive for economic growth and development. Notwithstanding the inclusion of priority programs, activities, and projects in the 2021 National Expenditure Program, may I respectfully request favorable consideration of the following priority projects, activities of the department as congressional initiative from among those which were not considered in the NAP. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Secretary Del Lorenzana. The chair acknowledges the presence of Senator Ronald De La Rosa and Senator Bongo. Before I recognize the members of
Ano
this
ba
committee,
tayo ngayon? 10? 12? Hindi na alam ang pecha.
the chair, sino ba yan? Gusto ko lang mag-focus sa AFP Modernization Program. I understand na for this year, tama yung sinabi mo, 8 billion yung nakat
Yes, sir.
from the
Yes, sir.
AFP Modernization Program Fund budget for 2020. But
Yes,
there's
sir.
another cut implemented sa 2019.
Yes, sir.
That's
Yes.
another 9.4
Yes, sir.
billion.
Yes, sir.
So for a total of 17.4 or 17.48 billion.
Yes, sir. 17.480.
You commented na minimal naman yung effect. So ang gusto malaman ng chair ng committee, how minimal is minimal? Because I understand yung Horizon 1 natin under the old law, 7898, supposed to have been completed way back in 2017.
Yes, sir.
So I'd
Yes,
like
sir.
to find out ano status ng Horizon 1. And then yung Horizon 2 is supposed to be halfway in its implementation as we speak. So gusto lang malaman ng committee because this will be asked definitely when we conduct our plenary debates. Ano yung mga tinamaan? Because meron kayong 143 projects, di ba, total?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. When 19.4, actually ang total na nakat sa inyo, 19.3 billion.
Yes, sir. 19.3.
Yung sa AFP Modernization, 17.4. So meron pa rin nakat from your regular budget na around 2 billion pesos. Kindly give the details nga.
Meron pa tayo dito. Jo. In this paper that I'm holding here, 2019 unreleased appropriation, 9.4 billion, at sabi mo kanina, yung tinanggal, ang kinuha ulit ng DBM, and for 2020, 8 billion, total of 17. Yes, sir.
But ang total nakat sa inyo, 19.4, 19.3
Yes, sir, because there are other funds that came from
regular budget.
the Philippine Air Force, Navy, GHQ, DND. Office of Civil Defense is natanggalan, sir, ng 274 million. Yung headquarters ng GHQ is from 1 billion eh. And NDCP 13 million. Diba? Sir, if you do not have the details, we'll
Sige,
submit
submit na
na lang namin, sir, kung sino ang alin yung projects na
Kasi yung 143 projects nyo under Horizons 1 and 2, ano yan, total 419.3 billion.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So, nakat pa kayo, pero ang na-release lang sa inyo, total, nasa mga 133 billion. Out of the 419 billion requirement under the AFP Modernization, including the revised AFP Modernization, dapat 419B.
Yes, sir.
So, I cannot see how it can minimally affect the AFP Modernization, your capability development program. Malaki epekto nun kasi between 133 billion, 133.7 billion and 419 billion, ang laki ng difference.
Tapos nabawasan pa ng
Yes, tapos nabawasan pa sa COVID-19 ng another 17 billion. So, nasa na tayo ngayon?
I think yung sinabi namin, sir, na minimal is that it does not affect now because these are projects that has long gestation period. na pwede nating i-move yung procurement to the next years kung gumanda yung ating ekonomiya. And we can still achieve those capabilities later on. Hindi naman natin kailangan siguro ngayon sir, yung mga multi-role fighter natin, hindi natin kailangan pa ngayon.
Yeah, okay.
Saka
Yung sa
submarines.
Horizon 1, dapat kompleto na ito ng 2017. Kompleto na ba talaga?
We will make the
Yes.
report, sir.
And then Horizon 2, dapat halfway na. Halfway ba tayo talaga?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We will make, we'll submit, sir, yung report
I cannot see how it could happen kasi nga from 400 plus billion ang nare-release pa lang sa inyo 133.
Yes,
So
sir.
I cannot imagine how we could be halfway in the implementation of Horizon 2 and how we could have completed Horizon 1 in 2017.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Yun
sir.
lang.
Yes, sir.
Ano lang yun. Kasi pag sinabi nating Horizon 1, di ba ito yung initial defense posture?
Yes, sir.
Complied na yan. Dapat.
Dapat, sir.
2017.
Dapat, sir. Complied na.
Okay, Horizon 2, dapat ito yung minimum
Yes, sir.
defense or minimum credible defense posture.
So,
Nasa minimum
starting
credible defense
2018,
posture na ba tayo?
Sir, halfway na nga tayo, sir. 2018 to
Dapat
2020.
halfway.
Oo, sir.
Yung pondo hindi nagmamatch dun sa ating program o sa projection. Wala pang halfway yung release na pondo.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So, sige, discuss natin mamaya. In the meantime, I'd like to recognize Senator Amy. Manang Amy, you have the floor. Senator Amy Marcos or Senator Risa Ontiveros, if Senator Amy is not yet available. Senator Risa?
All right, Chair. Salamat po at magandang
Alright.
umaga. Thank you. Magandang umaga po, Sec. Lorenzana at yung buong DND family.
Good morning. Good morning, Senator.
Yes, sir. Good morning po. So magandang umaga po sa lahat. 209.1 billion pesos ang proposed budget ng DBM para sa ating Department of National Defense. Pang-apat na prioridad sa 2021 proposed budget. And in fact, mas malaki ang ilalaan sa DND kesa pa sa DOH kahit na nasa gitna tayo ng health crisis. Yeah, in any case, Mr. Chair, our defense establishment and the budget it's requesting has to be tailored towards the threats the country is expecting to face. Thus, first of all, Mr. Chair, I'd like to inquire with the good secretary whether a threat assessment has been prepared and what our defense establishment considers to be the greatest threats, whether external or internal, currently facing the Philippines, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, we have analyzed the threats to the country, and the greatest threats that we see at the moment are one, the communist insurgency that are still going on all over the country. Number two is the terrorist threat. Hindi pa rin natin na-address. Now, the external threat is being managed by our foreign affairs. The situation in the West Philippine Sea is stable at the moment and manageable. And as far as we are concerned, we can focus more our attention on the internal threats, which is to contain the communist insurgency and the terrorists. Mr. Chair, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Sec. Lorenzana. Even as a civilian but as a legislator, kaya ko naman pong sang-ayunan yung enumeration ng both external at internal threats ni Sec. Lorenzana. I would have hoped though that mas pinaka-priority pa rin ng ating DND ang external threats, lalo na sa diwa ng pagkaintindi ko sa primary mission, particular ng armed forces natin, na oriented nga po sa external threat. Bagamat alam ko na the AFP plays an important supportive role to the national police, lalo na sa mga internal threats. Yes, sir. for example, yung external threats na hindi lang pangunahin ang Department of Foreign Affairs ang tumutugon dito, pero syempre nandun yung DND at lalo na sa West Philippine Sea. I would have hoped, Mr. Chair, na in fact yun yung number one priority. Bagamat na-appreciate ko, for the record, Mr. Chair, yung mayat mayang statements ni Sec Lorenzana reflecting this primary concern na palagay ko nasa puso hindi lang ng DND at AFP pero ng marami nating sibilyan. And then I understand also yung pagka-enumerate ng terrorist threat dahil ito rin ay may external and international aspects. Naintindihan ko rin historically no yung paglista of course sa communist insurgency, pero I didn't expect na yun yung number one priority dahil nandiyan na nga yung national police at yun na nga even more strategically yung external orientation, at least sa pag-intindi ko sa ating armed forces. In any case, Mr. Chair, second question, sir, para kay Sec Lorenzana. Similarly, we also need to be aware of the weaknesses currently of our military to enable us to properly set our priorities vis-a-vis the budget process. So, Sec, what does the DND consider to be the biggest weaknesses of our military, Mr. Chair?
Mr. Chairman, the biggest weakness or gaps in the military capability are still our equipment, Mr. Chair. We lacked, of course, ships, aircraft. Although we have an incoming 16 Sikorsky or Black Hawk helicopters, which they will start arriving sometime towards the end of this year, and the whole lot will arrive by May or June next year. We also have the Super Tucano, 6 Super Tucano support aircraft that has already arrived. And so we are slowly increasing our capabilities, Mr. Chair, and also our web, what do you call this, capability to defend ourselves from cyber attack or cyber attack by other countries.
Yes.
That's one, and also the capability of our intelligence community. They need a lot of sophisticated equipment to support their efforts to monitor the enemy. I think those are the capabilities, the lack of capabilities, Mr. Chairman. The equipment that we are still trying to buy, both for the armed forces, Army, Navy, Air Force, for our intelligence, and for our cyber security effort. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Secretary. At ito nga pong mga tinukoy yung hindi lang weaknesses pero targets ng reinforcement. Ito po yung susubukan nating i-match dun sa proposed budget. I note po, Sec, na yung highlight yung paparating na equipment ay para for air, no? So and I hope na as you enumerated also, aside from the Army, you enumerated also the Navy, na ito yung isang importanteng i-build up din natin also in terms of equipment, lalo na dun sa pagpapahalaga natin, at least kasama nyo ako doon, no? Sa credible defense stance natin. Yes, Mr. Chairman, credible defense posture natin, lalo na sa West Philippine Sea. At alang-alang din actually sa mga mangingisda natin sa coastal areas na umaasa hindi lang sa Coast Guard pero sa Navy sa larangan ito ng West Philippine Sea at sa larangan din ng environmental protection. And I will get also, Mr. Chair, to the points raised by the good Secretary about cyber attacks and intel. So, Secretary, doon naman po sa usapin ng BCDA remittances. On September 7th, 2020, the BCDA stated that 13.2 billion pesos, which the BCDA should have remitted to the armed forces as the latter's share in the BCDA's proceeds was quote unquote parked with the Bureau of Treasury. Ms. Secretary, what is the status of these funds? What does it mean when we say that the funds were parked? Did the AFP earn any interest from this parking? And have these funds finally been remitted to the AFP, Mr. Chair?
You want to do projects na yun. On process na yun. So basically, mission.
Mr. Chairman, according to our records, the 13.2 billion pesos that are parked at the Bureau of Treasury, ay meron na pong nakalaan mga projects yan and the papers are moving. And if it is parked, it is only for safekeeping, Mr. Chairman. And sa tingin ko naman hindi kumikita to dahil hindi naman bangko yung yung Bureau of Treasury. I don't know if the Bureau of Treasury also is depositing this on a time deposit to the banks, but these are monies that could be tapped immediately to pay for some of the projects that are ongoing, Mr. Chairman.
And Mr. Chairman, Secretary, pag sinasabing projects para sa AFP at AFP lamang.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. This is for the modernization of the armed forces.
All right. So for the AFP modernization program. Right.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, salamat Mr. Chair. And Sec, pag sinasabing park for safekeeping, safekeeping for what? Or safekeeping from whom? Bakit hindi itini-turn over, as a matter of course, regularly, diretso sa AFP? Kasi yun naman po yung obligasyon ng BCDA dyan.
Mr. Chairman, these monies are already i-release na ito pagka nandyan na yung babayaran natin. And ready for notice of award, immediately it will be tapped. It will be used to pay for this projects, Mr. Chairman. Now, ang ibig sabihin ng park binigay na ng BCDA because if it is at the BCDA, hindi pa nare-remit yun sa national government for modernization. So, ang gagawin po na yan is ibibigay sa Treasury as the treasurer or the agency that keeps our money. So I can, Mr. Chairman, I can submit to you the proposed program for 2021 that will cover the 18.2, not only 17 as 13 as a while ago, but
18.
actually 18.28 billion na yung ating tinatarget na pagkakagamitan nitong ating perang ito.
Yeah. Excuse me, for the information of Senator Ontiveros, yung 13.2 billion, yun yung narimit ng BCDA, ang talagang destination on Treasury.
Thank you.
It's awaiting appropriation by the DBM. And for 2021, ang inappropriate lang ng DBM under the NEP is 5 billion. Tama ba yan, Secretary Lorenzan? 5 billion lang for
5 billion
2021
lang.
for under the AFP Modernization Program.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
So every time merong requirement ang armed forces, yung DND under the Modernization Program, doon sila kukuha ng pondo. But hindi pa na-release yung 13.2. Ang appropriated for 2021 is only 5 billion pesos. So doon yung kukunin sa 13.2. So that's it.
Well noted, Mr. Chair, at salamat po. So, Sec, for the 5B na i-appropriate for the AFP Modernization Program in 2021, ano na pong mga proyekto ito na identified by the AFP?
That's still under Horizon 2, no? Yung 5 billion for 2021, Del? Horizon 2 pa rin yan.
Yes, sir. For the 5 billion, it covers the Philippine Air Force long-range patrol aircraft, the Philippine Maritime ISR or Intelligence, Surveillance and Reconnaissance, GHQ deployable C2 or command and control system, 1.6 billion. GHQ encryption system development, 1.5. The Philippine Army forward support equipment, 384 million. Ang total po nito, Mr. Chairman, is 4.8, which is approximately 5 billion that was programmed by
Yes.
the DBM, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Sec. At ito pong mga projects, ito po yung kasama sa isa-submit niyong program, di po ba, sa committee through the chair? Because I was not able to take note of everything. Pero Sec, why not accelerate spending to modernize faster using the BCDA remittances? Dahil nandiyan na rin naman po yung pera, gaya ng sinabi ng chair, nasa treasury na po.
Just another information, yung basis
Yes,
ng
Mr. Chair.
remittance ng BCDA to the Treasury, yun yung letter addressed to the chairman of the Finance Committee, Senator Angara, from President and CEO Dizon at saka Chairman Garcia. So sinasabi nila, nakaremit na sila sa Treasury ng 13.2 and it's now up to DBM to appropriate. But yun nga, for 2021, 5 billion lang yung na-appropriate ng DBM under the AFP Modernization. By the way, the chair recognizes the presence of the minority leader, Senator Drilon, and with the permission of Senator Amy and the other senators, after Senator Risa, the chair takes note of Senator Drilon attending practically all committee hearings. So kung pwedeng papaunahin na lang natin siya para maka-scrum na siya right after. Thank you. Please continue.
Salamat, Mr. Chair. At batay din po sa isa sa mga huling sinabi nyo. So perhaps, Mr. Chair, I should also raise this question to DBM na why not appropriate faster para maka-accelerate ng spending ang DND para maka-modernize faster din ang AFP. Tama po ba, Mr. Chair?
Yes, that is correct. In fact,
You too,
kanina
Mr. Chair.
na-discuss namin, out of the 419 billion required under 7898, yung AFP modernization, and the revised, no? Ang nare-release pa lang, 133 billion pesos. So, ang daming utang ng gobyerno sa AFP modernization program. And these are laws passed by Congress. So, kaya ang discussion kanina, Senator Risa, kasi pagka sinabi nating Horizon 1, dapat accomplish na ito by 2017. Yung Horizon 2, dapat halfway na yung implementation. And with just 133 billion as released by DBM compared to the total requirement of 419 billion pesos, I cannot see how we will be halfway in the implementation of Horizon 2. So yeah, please continue.
Salamat, Mr. Chair. So mukhang important oversight function din natin dito sa Senate na i-accelerate yung mukhang masyadong mabagal, one-third of the way pa lang pala na i-appropriate ng DBM for spending for the total AFP modernization. We should be halfway, as the chair said, dapat pala halfway na tayo or ongoing na sa Horizon 2 pero hindi pa tayo umaabot sa Horizon na yun. So well noted din po, Chair, on my part. So actually, ayun, actually partly na nasagot na rin yung ibang mga tanong ko, but maybe just so I'm certain na I got the information that I'm trying to learn. Sec, how much has BCDA remitted to the AFP over the course of the last 4 years? And how much has BCDA earned over the same period? And lastly, has the AFP received its rightful share of the BCDA's proceeds? Kung meron pong hindi pa natalakay nung preceding exchanges natin, Sec, Mr. Chair.
For 4 years. Simula lang siya noon.
Kasi Mr. Chair, baka that's why equipment is still a weakness dahil masyadong mabagal yung pag-appropriate ng DBM kaya hindi makapagpabilis ng spending ang AFP for modernization.
Secretary Del, can you respond?
Yes, sir. I have in front of me the remittance of BCDA for the AP Modernization Program. For 2017, 4.574 billion. For 2018, 4.368 billion. For 2019, 2.4. And for 2020, 2.24 billion. A total of 10 of about 13 billion. 13 billion for the past 4 years, Mr. Chairman.
Opo. And how much, Sec, kung alam po nila, has BCDA earned over the same period at natanggap po ba ng AFP yung rightful share niya sa proceeds na iyon? Kasi para
Yes,
ding
Mr.
over
Chairman.
year on year, 2017 to 2018 to 2019 to 2020, parang incrementally, hindi lumalaki pero lumiliit. 4.5, 4.3B, 2.4, 2.2B. So comparatively, magkano po yung na-earn ng BCDA at tamang share po ba ng AFP ang napunta sa AFP?
Mr. Chairman, we are not privy to the
Right,
total
sir.
earnings of BCDA
Again, I
because
have some information here sa letter.
Mr. Chair.
Ang total na remittances ng BCDA sa national government starting from May 1993 hanggang December 2019 under the Ramos, Estrada, and Arroyo administrations, 32 billion, 32.3 actually. Under the Aquino administration, 14.4 billion. And under the present administration, for the past 3 years, nasa 16.367. Yun ang sa national government. And out of that, ang naging share ng AFP, yung sa 32 billion under the 3 administrations, 18.3 billion. Under the Aquino administration, out of the 14.46 billion, ang nakuha ng armed forces, 13 billion. And under the present administration, yung 16.367 billion for the past 3 years, ang nakuha ng AFP is 15.162 billion.
Maraming salamat, Mr. Chair. So mukhang from 93 to the Macapagal-Arroyo administration, at least more than half yung napunta, no? But it's good na mula sa nakaraang administrasyon hanggang sa ngayon ay almost the whole ay na-remit sa AFP. So maraming salamat para doon, Mr. Chair. Moving on, as the chair did earlier, to the AFP Modernization Program, during the September 3, 2020 hearing of the Commission on Appointments, General Gilbert Gapay, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, stated that 300 billion pesos of the AFP's projects remain unfunded, including the current phase of its modernization program. And DND initially requested a budget of, as I believe either the SEC or the chair noted earlier, initially requested a budget of 345 billion pesos, but DBM only recommended a budget of 208 billion pesos, or around 60% of the DND's proposal. Though this is higher, I note, Mr. Chair, than the DND's 191 billion peso budget in the 2020 GAA. So, my question, Mr. Chair, is, SEC, in relation to the fact that DBM only recommended a budget for DND of 208 billion pesos, or around 60% of the department's proposal, what is the status of the AFP's unfunded projects, particularly the current phase of its modernization program? What specific procurement programs were put on hold, SEC, Mr. Chair?
The Chief of Staff is here, present physically. General Gapay, kindly respond.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Your Honors. Yes, sir. We proposed a higher budget for 2021 and around more than 115 billion was not considered, and the bulk of these were supposed to be intended for our modernization. So we are now proposing the priority, sir, additional 28 billion of the 150 not considered to address pressing requirements of the armed forces, to include the 9 billion modernization fund for 2019, which was recouped by the national government to help in our COVID response, and other pressing requirements of the Army, Air Force, Navy, Your Honor.
Thank you, General, Mr. Chair. I hope that the Chief of Staff can submit to the committee through our chair the details of the 28B na ina-appeal pa rin ng AFP for its most pressing procurement programs, including for the modernization program. By the way, Mr. Chair, General, if you are at liberty to tell the committee what specific procurement programs would these most pressing encompass, especially under the modernization program?
Mr. Chair, Your Honor, of the bulk of the 28 billion we are requesting as additional budget for the armed forces, 9.4 billion represents modernization program. These are projects of the Army, Air Force, and Navy, particularly those covered under multi-year contracts, Mr. Chair, Your Honor, and mostly are projects for the procurement of aircraft, naval assets, as well as land combat power assets for the Philippine Army. And covered under the 9.4 billion are second and three tranches for payment, Mr. Chairman, Your Honor. Then aside from modernization requirements, we are also, for the Philippine Army, we also included the requirements for the operationalization of the 11th Infantry Division, which we activated and organized specifically for Sulu Province.
Yes.
And also, the bulk of it, of the 28 billion, would support the MOE requirements of newly acquired and delivered equipment of the modernization program for the Army, Air Force, Navy. We also have for the Philippine Army night fighting capability, as well as a cyber requirement for the Army, Air Force, and Navy, and also for the Air Force recovery of our aircraft, Mr. Chair, Your Honor.
Thank you very much, General, Mr. Chair. Well noted, and the committee will be guided, led by our chair, as we try to respond to this appeal, especially since these are for the most pressing needs. Maraming salamat po, Mr. Chair. At this point, I actually have more questions on the DITO presence in the military camps, cybersecurity or information warfare, as mentioned also by the good secretary, protecting our fishing vessels, as I mentioned earlier, and other budget items on the parachutes, on pensions. But I will suspend my questions for now, Mr. Chair, to give way to the minority leader, as the chair mentioned earlier. And then itanong ko na lang po kung magtawag ang chair ng second round. Maraming salamat po, Secretary. Maraming salamat po, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Risa. The minority leader is recognized. Of course, with the permission of Senator Aimee. Okay, Senator Dillon is recognized.
Yes, with the permission of Senator Aimee, I just ask a few questions, and I hope this has not yet been covered by the previous questions, and the chairman can so interrupt this representation if it has been so covered. Mr. Chairman, in the 2021 NEP, which we now are considering, one of the biggest increases went to the pension and gratuity fund, it amounts to 116.19 billion this year, while for next year the proposed allocation. I'm sorry. 100. Yeah, this year per my notes, the pension and gratuity fund is 116.19 billion, and next year it will be 172.89 billion. The increases in the pension and gratuity fund is largely due to the pension funds of our AFP retirees and veterans. For next year, the proposed allocation for the pension of
74.5, sir.
AFP retirees is 74.55 billion. And of this, 63.69 is allocated for the 140,510 retirees, while 10.86 billion is for the veterans. Is that a correct statement and examination of the budget, Mr. Chair, or the DND? Is that a correct?
Yeah, for the information of Senator Dillon, yung 116 billion, it's for the whole MUPs. Ang armed forces, I think it's only 74 billion, ano? 74.
74, sir.
Yung 116 is the, that's including PNP, BJMP, BAFP, all the MUPs.
I understand that, sir. And, I even thought that, yeah, and I mentioned that it is the proposed allocation for next year is only 74.55 billion for the AFP and its retirees, which is roughly 43% of the pension and gratuity fund. That's 43.11% of the 2021 NEP for pension and gratuity fund is for AFP retirees and veterans. As we are all aware, the chairman is leading the Senate in the committee discussion of how to resolve this issue, because in fact the burden on the national budget of this unfunded pension gratuity fund for the AFP affects every aspect, including the ability of the government to fund our modernization program, which we need. And therefore, unless we resolve this equitably, the issue of the pension funds, everything else is affected, including our ability to modernize our AFP. And we must remember also that in 2022, when the Mandanas ruling becomes effective, you will be the additional, if I recall correctly, about 400 billion in internal revenue allotment would have to be allotted from the 2021 600 plus billion. So as we go down through the years in the short term, the burden on the national budget becomes more significant. That's why, in my view, this requires the cooperation of every sector. And as I said, our chairman is leading the Senate committee on the committee in order to look into this, and has required the GSIS and the National Treasurer to submit options to the national government. But since this is an AFP budget hearing, may we know from the Secretary of National Defense how this issue is viewed, and what are the views of the Office of the Secretary on this very difficult issue? This is very sensitive, but we must address it. We cannot keep on sweeping it under the rug, because everything else would be prejudiced, including the modernization program of the UFP, to the extent that this burden is on our budget. So, Mr. Chairman, with your permission, can I ask for a statement from the DND Secretary on this matter?
Mr. Chairman, Your Honor, we view this with great concern, and we believe in the department that we cannot afford to have this burden on our people. The projection of the number of pensioners from now until 2026, there is an increase of about 20,000, and also the projected amount will increase from 63 billion for the retirees to 68 billion in 2026, which is a big burden. Hindi ko na po sinali rito yung yung mga veterans ng World War II, Korean, at saka dahil they are actually dying slowly. So siguro within the next 10 years, konti na lang ito. So ang maiwan na lang dito siguro, Mr. Chairman, ay yung mga pensioners ng retirees ng post-World War II na nag-retire starting nung mga 1950s o 1960s. So we have already worked on this, Mr. Chairman, sometime in 2017. But under the leadership of the Department of Finance, meron siyang proposal, and we actually have a proposed bill which he presented to the President how to fund, how to raise funds for this MUP or military uniform and uniform personnel. Yung self-sustaining siya. And according to the Department of Finance, we need about 3 to 7 trillion pesos that will be self-sustaining to support the MUPs. And they were looking at monetizing the AFP lands to support this. And also for the new entrants to or entrants to be paying, or those who are in the service to pay to contribute to the fund. And this fund will take effect to those who will be admitted to the service after the enactment of the law. I think personally, I think that makes sense, and we start to also contribute, those who are in the active service, to contribute to the pension fund, and we keep on monetizing some of the camps of the AFP, plus also the share of the government to make the fund self-sustaining. But it will take time to develop this, Mr. Chairman. But we cannot continue to kick the can down the road and to hope that somebody will pick it up. I think we should do it this time, during this term, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for that answer of the Secretary. The Secretary, did I catch him correctly mentioning that there was already a study in 2017 submitted to the President? Is that a correct?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. We presented that to the President already, and then after that, there was this information drive that went around the AFP and the PNP, being the two largest organizations that will benefit from the fund. Meron lang silang question, I think the soldiers, the sergeants, or the NCOs have a question. So ibinalik, and now I think Senator Bongo is ready to again submit a proposal or a proposed bill.
There's actually a pending bill.
A pending bill. And I think it reflects also the study that we made sometime 3 years ago, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so just for clarification, the proposed bill of Senator Go would reflect this 2017 study. And yes, I know for a fact that this is one of the bills being considered by the committee headed by Senator Lacson. Is that a correct statement, Mr. Secretary?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. In fact, it was Senator Go. He wasn't senator then, consulted with the IFP and PNP, and that's why medyo naantala yung pag-submit ng ating bill dahil we had to find a way to satisfy everybody na hindi nagreklamo yung mga sundalo.
Mm. So they propose there's a need for anywhere from 3 trillion to 7 trillion to fund the past service liabilities. Is that the estimate of the good? Can the secretary confirm that?
Correction, Mr. Chairman, I think that would be the amount that we will need to support the pension of everybody, the military and uniformed personnel, which is the EFP, PNP, Bureau of Coast
Yes.
Guard, and everybody there. After
Okay.
when the retiree, when those who are admitted in the service after the law is passed, yun po yung mga yung pala mag-i-start yun. Because ang reklamo ng mga nasa service ngayon, kung mag-effect ito, and they will be affected dahil it may be less than what those who retired already. So kaya ang effectivity nito is yung maapektuhan ay yung mga bagong pasok pagka na-enact na yung batas. And so they will not retire until 30 or 35 years. So yun pa lang ang pag-start ng yung gagamitin yung pondo na umpisahan na nating iponan ngayon.
Yeah, I will not go into much detail on this. So I just want to get a general general sentiment of our military and uniformed personnel on this very sensitive issue. And I'm glad that the secretary is open to this, and we can discuss the details in the committee of that is being chaired by Senator Lacson insofar as this particular issue is concerned. And we do hope to provide a solution through an equitable and viable pension fund in the next 6 months when we work on this measure. So as I said,
Senator Drilon, as another information, as instructed by the committee during our last hearing, all MUPs have complied and have submitted all the data needed by GSIS and the Bureau of Treasury. And it's now being consolidated and studied by the two agencies, GSIS and Bureau of Treasury. And anytime that they're ready, we are going to resume our committee hearings in that regard. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair, because I note the statement of the Secretary that anywhere from 3 trillion to 7 trillion is needed for the military and uniformed personnel to respond to this retirement and pension problem in our budget, which has been going on for years and has not been addressed because it is extremely difficult to address, very sensitive, but we have to address this, and I will support Senator Lacson in his effort to come up with a solution to this, even if it will take years, as long as we see the light in the end of the tunnel, because as of today, we do not see any, and we'll just, this burden, these increases will keep on piling up. It will become it's 63 billion for the AFP alone this year. It will continuously increase, if I recall correctly, by about 6 to 8% every year. So let's leave it at that, Mr. Chair, and we can discuss it more in detail in your committee. Just a second issue. Based on your submissions, the AFP discontinued 8 billion pesos worth of projects in the AFP modernization program, as this was realigned by virtue of Bayanihan 1. Can I confirm this, Mr. Secretary?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Your Honor. The 8 billion was taken from 2020 appropriation.
Yes. May we know what specific programs would have to be discontinued or were discontinued as a result of this realignment of the 8 billion?
That's just for 2020. Meron pang na-realize sa 2019, 9.4 billion papunta rin sa COVID for a total of 17 billion.
So 17 billion was realigned, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, by virtue of Circular 580 ng DBM.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, one, two, there are 9 projects totaling to 8.02 billion that were affected. These are not discontinued, but they are postponed for later procurement when we have funds, Mr. Chairman.
This is postponed for later procurement. Okay, how much is the 17 billion the correct amount for last year and the current year as the funds realigned from our AFP modernization program? Can the Secretary confirm that, sir?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Your Honor. For the 2019 appropriation, 9.4 billion was it was not yet appropriated, so it stayed with the DBM, and that is added to the 8 billion that came from the 2020 GAA, that total 17.48 billion, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, my first comment is this: that it doesn't say it is not a good comment on the ability of the AFP to absorb the amounts allocated for the modernization program. Why is there such a huge, why is there 17 billion which was unobligated in your budget? You had the budget for this, but it was not obligated and therefore was realigned. So may we know why there is such a substantial amount of unobligated budget of 9.4 billion in 2019 and 8 billion in the current budget, a total of 17 billion. As I said, this doesn't reflect well on the AFP's absorptive capacity. In very broad strokes, can the good Secretary make of record why there is so much unobligated amounts in the modernization program?
Mr. Chairman, the 9.4 billion 2019 fund was ready for implementation. Naabutan po ito ng COVID. Now, for the 2020 appropriation amounting to 8 billion, these were actually taken from the 2020 because the Bayanihan 1 was passed in, I think, in April or March, na ito na yung kinuha ng DBM to add to the Bayanihan Fund. So, hindi po kami nagkulang dito. They are ready for implementation, but naabutan po ng COVID pandemic.
Well, with all due respect to the good Secretary, it reflects the department's inability to really procure and obligate these funds. We note that 2019 budget, it's still 2019, and 9.4 billion was unobligated, and for 2020, already 8 billion was unobligated. With all due respect, we are inclined to get to the conclusion that the absorptive capacity of the AFP must be reviewed by the good Secretary in order that these funds will not remain unspent. And next year, there will be again substantial allocations for the AFP modernization program. How much is it for next year, Mr. Chairman? How much is the allocation?
5 billion
5
for
billion.
2021.
5 billion for 2021.
25 plus 8 is 33? 33 billion for next year, Mr.
For
Chairman.
modernization?
For modernization, because there is automatic 25 billion and then from
The
BCDA.
automatic 25.
So how much is the total for next year, Mr. Chairman? Can we have that figure again? For the
The
AFP
total
modernization?
is
5 yung regular, sir.
32.9 billion, Mr. Chairman, the total.
For 2021.
Explain nyo. Yung 8 na kinuha, ibabalik? Ay, paki-explain nyo yan.
Mr. Chairman, there is an automatic allocation every year of 25 billion for the modernization from GAA. And the 8 billion that was taken by the DBM from the 2020 GAA to be used for COVID fund, it will be restored, is restored by DBM. So the total is now 33 billion, Mr. Chairman.
Sila na 9 billion, sir. Yung hindi na ito.
So 8 billion will be restored
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
from the current year's realignment.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
When you say, sir, restored, will that be again in the 2021 GAA, or this is a continuing appropriation?
It will be part of the 2021 GAA, Mr. Chairman. Dahil kinuha ito tapos ibinalik lang ng DBM.
Isn't the allocation a continuing appropriation, meaning a capital outlay good for 2 years? Meaning if it was...
No, sir. Ito yung hindi pa na, this is not yet obligated, 2020. Kinuha, parang hiniram lang ibabalik ngayon. But for the 9.48 billion for that are being utilized for a multi-year program na kinuha nila for 2019 has not yet been restored in the 2021 budget.
Yeah. May I seek guidance from if the DBM resource persons are around, Mr. Chairman? Are these allocations are capital outlays, which is good for budget for two fiscal years, so that the 2019 unobligated 9.4 billion is a continuing appropriation and can be funded for next year. We would like to be clarified, Mr. Chair, if there is a DBM representative in the hearing.
There's no DBM representative, Senator Drilon. May I just clarify muna, yung 5 billion coming from PCDA is inclusive of the 25 billion regular budget. So that's on
No, sir,
top of the 25 plus
It's on
8.
top.
There's
of it.
another 5 billion coming from BCDA.
Yes, sir.
So that's a total of 37 billion for 2021. Is that correct? Sabi nyo, regular 25 for
Yes,
modernization.
sir. 25.
That's from the GAA.
Plus 5,
Plus 5 from BCDA, so that makes
33.
28. Ano no?
33.
30.
33, sir.
Yeah. Plus another yung na-hold na 8. So 38 ang makukuha nyo.
Yes, sir. That is
Thank
our
you.
projection, sir.
What about from the 2019, the 9.4 billion, which was realigned?
Mr. Chairman, it was not restored. Still
Sorry, sir.
Returned by the DBM. Mr. Chairman, kasama sa Christian sana, but only the 8 billion was restored by the DBM in the National Expenditure Program.
Yan ang hindi sa maliwanag sa akin, Mr. Chairman. Okay, so right now, the resource person, the Secretary of National Defense, says that for our modernization program, we have just about 37.38 billion, little less, consisting of 28 billion from the present from the 2021 NEP, another 5 billion from the BCDA, and 8 billion from the restored items, so-called. Is that a correct addition, sir? Is that? I'm trying to figure out. Yeah, this is.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's Mr. Chairman. 25 billion from the
Plus
GAA, plus 5 from the BCDA, and then 8 from the 2020 restored fund, 8 billion. Total of 38 billion for 2021, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. My other question is still hanging. What happened to the 2019 9.4 billion? This was realigned, as you testified to, Mr. Secretary. So is this authorization lost? Is that authorization no longer effective in the sense that while you were authorized to spend 9.4 billion in 2019 as a capital outlay, this authority can no longer be funded, or can it be funded?
I am not. I do not know, Mr. Chairman, how this should be funded. Because hindi naman ibinalik ng DBM doon sa 2021, we were asking for that to be restored, but only the 8 billion was restored.
With the permission of Senator Drilon, I cannot really understand why DBM would cut the 9.4 billion that you said you were ready to implement, di ba?
Yes, sir.
Kung ready kayo
Hindi
to
pa
implement,
natin,
ba't niya hinugot papuntang COVID? Tapos ngayon i-restore yung 8 para nagkalimutan na sa 9 sa 2019.
Ano mo ba ibig sabihin, Mr. Chairman, ng ready to implement?
As
He said
mentioned
ready
by
for
the Secretary, yung 2019 budget na 9.4 na na-pool ng DBM to respond to COVID sa bayanihan, they were ready to implement that, but it was cut from their 2019 budget para ma-realign papuntang sa bayanihan.
Yes, that was the statement of the Secretary. I am trying to seek a clarification, Mr. Chairman, but by what the Secretary exactly mean by ready for implementation? Were there already biddings done? What? Because ready for implementation is so broad, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, it's supposed to mean obligated already kasi ready to implement.
Yes, sir. Ready for implementation is that yung mga projects na yan, na bidding na, everything, and ready for, pero hindi pa napipirmahan yung contract. So ongoing, so hindi pa napipirmahan yung mga contracts, and then naabutan tayo ng COVID. So
hindi pa obligated.
Hindi pa obligated, sir.
Hindi pa obligated.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Kung hindi pa obligated, hindi ulit pinunduhan? Okay, so if it has not been obligated, it has not been funded again. So the 2021 Modernization Fund does not include the 9.4 billion. And that is why the question of whether or not this is a capital outlay, which is good for 3 years, is a valid question, and we hope we can be helped on that, at least this representation, because if it is a capital outlay, then that authorization or budget item continues. If I recall correctly, the capital outlay is good for 2 years. If it's 2019, then it's good until 2021.
the 8 billion, hindi pa ito na-bid, wala pang bidding.
Wala pa, sir. We were still
So
trying
it doesn't
to,
make sense. Dapat ang nirestore yung sa 2019 kasi yun ang ready to be obligated. Notice of award na lang hinihintay. At ang hinold sana yung 8 billion under the 2020 kasi hindi nyo pa nga na-i-bid out. Di ba?
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Parang mali yung, parang walang sense.
Okay, we will not, we have other colleagues who would want to ask this question. Can I just request from the secretary, give him, I would like the secretary to go back to his technical staff on the budget, give the committee a more complete picture of how much really is available as AFP Modernization Fund for 2021 and focus particularly on the issue of the 9.4 billion in 2019 if such authority is still valid. And as the chairman said, there's no sense in allocating 8 billion and not funding the 9.4 billion if the same is just on the verge of being awarded. I mean, the contracts are about to be awarded. So may we just ask the secretary to submit to Senator Lacson and copy furnish the members of this representation on a clarification of how much is the AFP modernization plan. Is that feasible, Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we will submit.
Because again, I would go back to the ability of the AFP to disburse these funds because we can see that as of May, you still had 9.4 unobligated. Technically unobligated funds 2019. By the way, how much is the AFP Modernization Fund in 2019? How much?
25 billion, Mr. Chairman.
How much?
25 billion from the general appropriation, Mr. Chairman.
25
billion.
25? 25?
Yes, yes, sir.
So
25.
So 9.5 billion over 25 billion is about 45%, just roughly calculating. That means of 5 months or 3 months or 5 months into 2020, you have not disbursed of about 40 over 40% of your 2019 budget for modernization. Again, I go back to my statement earlier. There is a question in my mind about the absorptive capacity on this modernization plan. So we keep on saying that our armed forces lags behind in terms of equipment, particularly, and assets compared to other areas. But maybe we should look at our ability to disburse of the funds allocated under this program. As I would repeat, for 2019, out of the 25 billion allocated, you have only you have disbursed only about 9 billion. I'm sorry, you have disbursed only about 16 billion, leaving a balance of roughly 9.4 billion. Maybe the good secretary should include in his report, in his written report, so that we will carry on this very, very much. What are the plans that we have in order to expedite and move faster the disbursements of these funds as against what we had? if we could not even disburse 25 billion in 2019, you know, 38 billion next year looks like a challenge to me. So we would request the good secretary a written report that will be submitted to the chairman on two areas. Number one, how much is the allocation, particularly does it include the 9.4 billion on top of the 38, 9.4 billion in 2019? And number two, what are the steps that will be taken in order to disburse, to improve our absorptive capacity? Can we have this, Mr. Chairman? Can the good chairman confirm the request of this representation to the resource person?
Please respond.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Your Honor. We will submit the required report. How much are the funds and steps to improve our capability to disburse the funds.
And I assume yung 2019, hindi pa kasama yung BCDA. Yung 25 billion, sa GAA pa lang yun.
GAA pa lang sila.
So
Yung
how much
BCD,
was contributed by the
BCDA is 2 point, the BCDA has contributed 2.43 billion.
So that's 25 plus 2 plus billion. So
Yes, sir.
27
So
plus.
that is 27.4.
Okay.
So, 27.4. So talagang our absorptive capacity, Mr. Secretary, can stand improvement. Would you agree with that by reviewing our process?
It appears so, Mr. Chairman, but kung hindi ito kinuha nung sa COVID, ay maaaring ay naano na ito, na-obligate na ito because there are already programs ready to be funded by the 9.4 billion.
Okay. Sige, just include that in your written report, Mr. Secretary, so that we will not devote so much time on this.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We will comply, sir.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, just may I first ask whether the DND, or one of its agencies, is involved in the Marawi Rehabilitation Task Force? Is that directly under the DND or not, Mr. Chair?
Mr. Chairman, it is not. It is under the HUD-C, but we have agencies there. They have units that are also involved, but they receive their funding to implement the horizontal development from either NHA or HUD-C, Mr. Chairman. The in charge is not the DND.
Okay. Well, in that case, Mr. Chair, I can yield the floor to my other colleagues. These in the area on procurement and on pension are the major areas I wish to touch upon. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Drilon. The chair recognizes the presence of Senator Bong Revilla. So Senator Amy Marcos is recognized.
Nahihilo.
Nakamute po kayo, Senator Amy. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I just like to follow up because according to, per the understanding of the DBM, 33 in total, 25 plus 8. Yung additional 5 billion from the BCDA, ano yun? Kasi hindi naman siya kasama doon sa automatic release ninyo na tigit 25 per year. Just to clarify, to make sure we're working on the same numbers. So 33 ba or 38 talaga? What's the additional 35 billion from BCDA to do with?
Mr. Chairman, we are looking at 38 billion dahil 25 yung automatic allocation from GAA, 5 from BCDA. Now, the BCDA is an off-budget funding, and the 8 billion will be is the money that was taken by DBM in this year and they are restoring it for
Yes,
2021.
Mr. Secretary, klaro naman yung 8 billion ng DBM kasi Arian at saka yung 25 klaro rin, yung additional 5, yun lang naman ang hindi na include. According to DBM kasi, nasa 33 lang kayo. I'm just concerned kasi ilang beses na kayo nakaltasan and then this will be another confusion.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, the BCDA fund is the projected earnings or share of the AFP. So binibilang namin ito, Mr. Chairman, dahil ito yung nakikita, yung report sa amin ng
I
BCDA.
see.
But it is not sure if they can give us this
I
money.
see it's unprogrammed pala. Okay. So what
Ang
we're
program mo.
I see. Okay, now I understand po. Yes, I saw it in the unprogrammed, pero alam naman natin, pahirapan ngayon ang tax collection. So, baka malabo yung mga unprogrammed natin. We're actually having a working budget of 33 billion, that's right?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this is a program fund from BCDA. So,
Ang
ang
program,
sigurado lang
pero
itong
Senator Amy, ang program
Yes.
yan, pero sigurado merong 13.2 na nasa treasury. So available na yung 5 billion. Depende na lang sa DBM kung they'll be kind enough to release that or appropriate that.
Yes, that's the question po. Considering na lagi nakakaltasan, hindi naman nadadagdagan. Yun nga, I think that the chair already earlier requested what projects there are under Horizon 1 and 2. Ang itatanong ko na lang, ano pa yung mga priorities sa dami ng kaltas sa inyo, yung -8, -9, what are your priorities, kumbaga? Because I think we should ask if there is a chance to add or to augment some of these or make certain that the 5 billion will really come to you. What are the priorities you've identified in the effort to catch up with Horizons 1 and 2 of the revised modernization?
Mr. Chairman, can we just submit a report, a written report about this because marami pong detalye yan na
Yes, yes.
I do not have the details now with me, Mr.
No
Chairman.
problem. No problem, Apo Secretary. No problem with that. Medyo suntok sa buwan to, but we've been talking about minimum credible defense. To your mind, what is minimum credible defense? Is there a definition or a list of goodies that we are actually working on so that we have an effective force present in the exclusive economic zone and are able to protect national interests and all these things that we'd like to support? Is there a DND AFP definition of our minimum credible defense?
Mr. Chairman, the way we understand the term minimum credible defense is that pwede naman nating protektahan yung ating interests. We can face up some intruders or intruders to our territory na pwede naman tayong mag-stand off sa kanila. Yung pwede na tayong hindi naman lalaban but to protect our interests like our domain territories. Hindi yung basta na lang papasok yung intruders na hindi wala man lang tayong haharap sa kanila. As of now, Mr. Chairman, wala naman tayo talagang assets to face some of the intruders that are armed in our territory. So yung minimum credible defense na nakikita natin is meron tayo namang ihaharap na capabilities like ships and other capabilities like missiles para hindi naman tayo apihin or whatever you call that na they can just intrude into our territory without being challenged by our troops.
Yes, I see the chart on the board, but are these actually broken down into equipment? Because that's really where we're sorely lacking. Are they actually broken down into planned procurement schedules, equipment, and timelines?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. The basic capabilities that we are looking at are the air defense systems, maritime defense, which includes capital ships, land defense systems, include also some whatever the air defense or land defense, and joint command and control that will capacitate the major service combat forces to operate in a joint operating environment and execute the EFP plans to defend our interest. Now, ang sabi ko kanina, marami tayong dapat bilihin so that we can also defend our territory, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, this also involves protecting our exclusive economic zone, Mr. Secretary. To your mind, how many percent or how far along are we in obtaining or achieving minimum credible defense position? Are we there at 50%? Are we there at 70%? How ready are we to take on an intruder, as you referred to earlier, and defend our national interest?
I
Anong
think
tingin mo? Ilang percentage natin?
maybe, Mr. Chairman, wala pa tayo sa 25% dahil meron nga tayo mga barko dyan ngayon.
25%, nakakatakot naman po.
Oh, that is true, Mr. Chairman. Dahil yung ating mga yung ating mga ships diyan hindi naman armed, hindi naman yan pwedeng sumagupa sa mga so even if we have these ships, they do not have the capability. Wala naman silang armaments. So ang tingin ko until such time that we get our 2 frigates, complete the procurement of our 2 frigates from Korea na merong mga armaments that is really intended for the frigates, then hanggat hindi natin na kukuha yon, I think we still not have a credible minimum credible defense posture to defend our territory or maritime domain.
Yes, Mr. Secretary, you said that wala pa sa 25%. Kapag nagkaroon tayo ng 2 frigate, aabot na tayo sa 100%? Hindi naman siguro kaagad-agad.
Not yet, Mr. Chairman, dahil yung 2 frigates na yan, meron pa mga 5 corvettes na bibilhin plus 6 offshore patrol vessels that will augment this to yung sasamahan itong mga frigates natin in the operations in the South and the West Philippine Sea. Pagka nakuha natin lahat yun, I think we can already say that and plus we can we can complete our ISR, the long range patrols plus some of the air defense systems, then I would say that we would have achieved the minimum credible posture.
With the permission of Senator Amy,
Yes, please,
kaya
Mr.
pa
Secretary.
natin mag-catch up consistent with the schedule under Horizon 2, di ba? Dapat by 2022, accomplish na natin yung minimum credible defense posture. But as things, how we're doing right now, 25%, kasi dapat halfway na tayo. So imposible na nating ma-accomplish yung masunod yung schedule ng Horizon 2 na by 2022, nasa minimum credible defense posture na tayo?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, we cannot up to 2022. At the rate that we are going, hindi natin kaya yon. Maybe we are looking at the next horizon as a 3rd horizon before we can complete our minimum credible posture.
And yung Horizon 3, ito na yung credible defense posture.
Yes, sir.
Ito na yung ultimate goal
Yes, sir. Kasi
ng
meron
modernization.
tayong multiple fighters.
So, kung ipaproject, anong taon yan? Considering the pace that we are undertaking right now, projection lang.
Projection, Mr. Chairman, 2027, 2028.
2028. Thank you, Senator Marcos.
Yes, thank you very much. Yun ang itatanong ko eh. Paano pa tayo
The Chair, teka muna. The Chair would like to acknowledge Senator Bongo, who is physically present.
Thank you very much. So, Mr. Secretary, ito yung problema, no? Kung paano tayo magre-replanning kasi as you said, we're only at 25% when in fact we should be midway. So you have on many occasions complained that the procurement laws sometimes do not help military procurement. Kaya lang, sa kabila ng pagnanais namin na tulungan at dagdagan ng budget at talagang habulin itong mga modernization schedules, madalas na sinasabi na yung AFP at yung Navy, higit sa lahat, hindi talaga nakakapag-kompleto ng project. I remember the COA findings kasi the ones for the year hindi pa tapos, 28 AFP projects worth 5.7 billion were not completed. And then this included very key items such as firepower upgrade for EDA M113 tanks, tapos yung delivery ng mga designated marksman rifles, all these things. Ano ba talaga yung problema? Kanina tinatanong ni Senator Drilon, bakit hindi nakakapag-disburse? At parang hindi kami makaintindi kung talagang bid na-award na, kulang na lang yung obligated, bakit i-retrieve pa ng DBM yun? Baka may kulang talaga. Ano ba yung problema? Bakit hindi absorb ika nga ng DND ang mga pondong na ibibigay?
Mr. Chairman,
What happened to this 28 AFP projects?
Mr. Chairman, the modernization program fund is meron pong mabuhay yan eh. It is not continuous. And we can only start bidding or making some studies about the procurement. Meron na kaming gusto bilhin, pero the only time that we can start the process of procurement is when there is already funds. So, kung minsan naabutan nito ng naglalaps because some of the equipment that we are trying to buy are capital equipment and multi-year. Tapos, bago pa namin ito ma-award, ay lapse na yung pera. That is the reason why there are some funds that were not obligated.
Yes, this seems to be occurring time and again. And perhaps you can get an update so that we don't need to inquire again at plenary what happened to these 28 AFP projects. Were they finally completed after the timeline that you explained was inconvenient? Dahil meron na naman dito sa Philippine Navy, only 5 projects out of 23 program projects from 2015 to 2017 and onwards, parating hindi natatapos. Can it be clarified? What are the program projects that were undelivered and not completed? And have they finally been completed? Kasi they keep occurring year after year in your report.
Mr. Chairman, can we just make a report on that because I
Yes.
don't think the Navy people are here.
Yes, okay, no problem po. Yung AFP at saka yung Philippine Navy, yung naka-indicate lang sa COA reports na 5 out of 23 lang ang na-accomplish. I'd also like to inquire about the hospitals. Obviously, we are in the time of COVID, and given that we're in the time of COVID, we are quite concerned that a few years back or a year back, the Veterans Memorial Hospital was mired in controversy. I now see that you get a budget of 1.752 billion. Maybe get a quick update on that as well as the AFP Medical Center, given that some of our men and officers have fallen ill as well. Perhaps the head of the Veterans Memorial, have we clarified what happened in the corruption charges, the replacement of the chief of hospital?
Director Chong is here, present virtually.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Your Honors. Ma'am, can you repeat please the question?
Yes.
May problema lang ako.
Your hospital was mired in controversy a couple of years back, and now you're getting 1.752 billion. May I know what your priorities are?
Priorities, sir.
Yes, Mr. Chair, our priority for now is our drugs and medicines for the outpatients. Uh, from our total requirement for the medicines is about 910 million. And out of that, 325 million is for inpatient and 525 million is for 585 million is for outpatient. But then what was given to us from the NEP is only 159 or about 160 million with a deficiency of about 425 million. Yung po ang hinihingi po namin ngayon.
So, wala kami maaasahan na titigil yung reklamo na walang medisina, walang supplies. Tuloy-tuloy pa rin ang kakulangan next year.
We're hoping, ma'am, na ma-address na nga ho namin yun. For now, we have less patients dahil yung pong mga regular na patients ay hindi po nagpapa-admit sa hospital. And our focus is more on our COVID patients. But then, on the average, we get about 200,000 patients, outpatients a year. And with a budget of only 160 million, pag dinivide nyo po yun,
Parang wala yun, ano?
ang baba po ng kasi lalabas po noon
Ano yung karamihan ng 1.7 billion mo kung hindi drugs and medicine? Kasi yung inaasam-asam ng tao eh.
Ma'am,
What's the bulk of your 1.7 billion budget? Puro sahod ba yan? O capital outlay? Ano bang breakdown yan? Kasi wala sa binigay sa amin. Akala ko nasa drugs na yan eh. Sa wakas eh makakadali na tayo ng gamot.
Ma'am, ang 1.7 billion, ang PS po noon, para sa PS is about 813 million. Ang MOE, ito po yung sa mga gamot, mga 925 million. And for capital outlay is only about 20 million, 12 million. So, yung pong iba ho, sa...
Halos kasing laki yung PS sa gamot. Yun ang problema.
Opo. Malaki ho talaga ang requirement natin sa gamot po.
Hindi, malaki yung PS mo, kulang yung gamot.
Kulang, opo. That's correct.
Okay, perhaps the Vice Chair Lacson and our Chairman of Finance can look into this. If there are any funds available somewhere, we should really look into the military hospital.
For the information of Senator Marcos, for this year, the subcommittee proposed to augment the budget for medicine sa BMMC 900 million. Ang naadap lang sa GAA 100 plus million yata or 100 million. So we will address the 425,000 pesos, 425 million, ano?
Yes, sir.
425 million. So yun. Taon-taon naman, in-augment namin yung BMMC.
Kaya nga pinapangunahan ko na full support tayo sa ating Vice Chair. Lastly na lang kay Secretary Lorenzana, the islands in the West Philippine Sea already have Filipino inhabitants. What are the efforts of the DND to protect the sovereignty of the Philippines? In general terms, we read about them constantly in the newspaper, but of course, the defense posture always seems grossly inadequate.
Mr. Chairman, the Air Force and the Navy continues to patrol the West Philippine Sea regularly. And at the same time, we continue to improve our facilities in the 9 islands that we occupy in the West Philippine Sea. Malapit na pong matapos yung pag-asa, yung airstrip doon. Gagawin na ngayong taon na to. And maybe next year it will be already paved and we can bring more equipment there and build up facilities for our people and the fishermen.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Ang tinatanong ko, alam natin na ginagamit ng ibang mga dayuhan sa lugar na yun, yung quasi-civilian swarming efforts, yung mga fishermen, mga naval militia na hindi outright na military. Are we taking any efforts in conjunction with the communities involved in that regard?
Mr. Chairman, yes, we are aware that the other side is using what they call the civilian militias, but actually these are part of the Navy, their Navy. And although they are there, hindi naman nila tayo minomolestya. They are just there. They are also fishing. They are also acting as fishermen and fishing with the big boats. And I don't know how
we have
they
no
can also
effort.
develop such kind of effort.
We have no intention of developing a counterpart effort.
We do, Mr. Chairman, but we need to procure some capital assets like ships for them so that they can also operate in our maritime domain.
So that's the only thing that we can do is just wait for the fishing vessels, because I understand that the local government units there, as well as the fishermen cooperatives, were willing to be trained and awaiting for the Navy or the SND to call upon them in some way so that they could organize and at least prepare.
Mr. Chairman, in that case, then I will direct the Philippine Navy to explore these activities, itong proposal na to. And I think it's a very good proposal that some of our fishermen, real fishermen, will also act as civilian militias for the U.S. Navy, for the Philippine Navy.
Yes, that is something that we need to look into, whether in fact we have the boats or not. We can't stand by waiting. The least we can do is to organize whatever we have and train up the skill sets of our men. Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. Thank you very much, Apo Vice Chair.
Thank you.
Thank
for
you, ma'am.
Senator Bongo, i-clarify ko lang ito, no? Under the Horizon 1, ito yung mga naiwan na naapektuhan ng Budget Circular 580. 113 million do sa Philippine Navy Base Support Logistics. Ang naka-remark dito, included in the revised 2020 fiscal year 2020 POE. Anong status nito? Na-implement na rin ito? Ongoing.
Ongoing, sir.
And there's another 2 million, 2.02 million Philippine Air Force Basing Support System radar, Lot 4C, reschedule the implementation to calendar year 2021. So naka-on schedule ito. So talagang tapos na yung Horizon 1. Pag na-implement itong dalawang projects. Kasi ito yung nakunan sa COVID eh.
Yes, sir. After that, matapos na yung Horizon 1.
Talagang finish na.
Yes, sir.
Hindi, kasama na sa na-cancel yun.
Oo.
Basta
Yes, sir.
sa Horizon 1, yung dalawa lang tinamaan na
That's it, sir.
projects.
That's it.
So Horizon 2 naman yung iba, yung tinamaan doon sa kinuhang 9.4, no? Senator Go is recognized.
Salamat, Mr. Chair, Secretary Lorenzana, General
Good morning,
Gapay,
Mr. Senator.
and Sec. I am here to manifest my support to the budgets of Department of National Defense, headed by Secretary Delphine Lorenzana, and its attached agencies, namely the Armed Forces of the Philippines, AFP, Government Arsenal, Philippine Veterans Affairs Office, National Defense College of the Philippines, and the Office of the Civil Defense, OCD. Sir, physically present po ako to show my full support to the DND and to the Armed Forces of the Philippines. Our military and uniformed personnel perform a vital task of ensuring our nation's peace and security. Even the Constitution recognizes the invaluable role of the military and uniformed personnel in protecting the nation and its citizens from threats both within and outside the country's borders. Just recently, the Joint Task Force Sulu of the Philippine Army's West Mindanao Command was able to nab 3 suspected suicide bombers in Barangay San Raimundo in Jolo. The JTF and the PNP Criminal Detection Unit, CIDG, made the arrest and recovered improvised explosive device rigged with 2 pipe bombs and other components. This is only one of the many personal sacrifices of our military personnel have to make in order to secure our lives, prevent unimaginable death of innocent civilians, and destruction of property. They are important frontliners of our nation. My salute to all of you. I join President Rodrigo Duterte in extending full support to our military and uniformed personnel. One of his first directive as president was to double the compensation of the military and the uniformed personnel in recognition of their valiant efforts to protect and secure our country. When I was still with the executive, I was the one who continuously followed up and made sure that the directive of the president would come into fruition. Thank you also to our chairman, Senator Lacson, na suporta po nito. As a legislator, I continue to fight for our devoted military and uniformed personnel. I have filed a bill for our military and uniformed personnel that aims to provide free legal assistance to police and military officers. Additionally, I have also filed Senate Bill 1419, which aims to maintain financial flexibility on the part of the government while also ensuring that the state can and will continue to provide adequate benefits and remuneration to our men and women in uniform. I laud my esteemed colleague, Senator Ping Lacson, who is the chairman of the committee and the chairman of the National Defense Committee, for prioritizing the passage of the said measure. Matagal nang kailangan po ang pension reform. Mas malaki ang binabayaran ng gobyerno para sa mga retirees kaysa sa mga sundalong in active service. This is an impending financial disaster na magko-compromise sa fiscal stability natin. Noong 2019, merong mga sergeant majors na lumapit sa amin ni Pangulong Duterte, nakiusap na wag mo nang implementa dahil marami sa kanilang gusto mag-retire at makuha ang mga benepisyo nila. Inilapit ko po ito kay Pangulo at pinagbigyan naman sila ni Pangulo. Kaya lang, kung hayaan lang natin ito, magbabalo na ang fiscal impact ng pension dahil sa old pension system. Hindi ito maging sustainable in the long run. Balansihin rin natin, ibigay sa mga sundalo what is due to them, pero ensure natin ang fiscal stability ng ating bansa. Kaya nagkaroon ng compromise, isang win-win solution na nakasaad sa Senate Bill 1419, magkakaroon ng MUP, pension reform, pero applicable lang ito sa mga new entrants, para lang ito sa papasok pa lang sa active service matapos maging effective ang batas na ito. Ang mga kasalukuyang nasa active service, hindi apektado, makukuha pa rin nila kung ano ang inaasahan nilang makuha. Dahil sa bagong pasok pa lang, dahil sa mga bagong pasok lang ito i-apply, after 35 years pa natin mararamdaman ang epekto ng pension reforms na ito pag nagretiro na ang mga bagong pasok ngayon, yung mga tinuturing na new entrants. Maaring wala na tayo sa mundong ito at that time, ang mahalaga ay nabigyan ito ng solusyon sa panahon ngayon at nabigyan natin ang ating kasundaluan ngayon ng peace of mind. Yun po ang kanilang hinihingi. Kami rin, sir. Both the finance and the budget departments have already expressed their support to the pension reform. It is our task in the legislature to listen to the soldiers, the retirees, the future soldiers, and everyone else who will be affected by this. The President and I will support the will of the majority. We will listen, and we will always have, as we always have, bukas po ang aming opisina sa lahat ng gustong magsalita. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Meron lang po akong dalawang tanong. Short question lang po, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, based from the discussions, there is still a gap at 43.4% or 23 projects of modernization pending for Horizon 1. Kailan po ito matatapos? Kaya pa ba natin masunod yung time frame ng Horizon 2, itong 2018 to 2022? Ilan po ba ang, pangalawang question ko, pwede niyo naman sagutin kaagad. ilan po ang membro ng military na nagpositibo sa COVID at ano po ang pwedeng maitulong at ano na po ang ginagawa natin para sa kanila. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yolgapay?
Mr. Chair, Your Honor, on the modernization program, Horizon 1, it comprises of equipment. It also included in that are base development projects, doctrine development projects, and human resource development projects. Most of the projects pertaining to equipment were already completed. And we're finishing up some projects on basis development, sir. And some projects on doctrines development and human resource development. Although very minimal, sir, yung funding requirements nito. And then they are included in the number of projects that are ongoing under the Horizon 1. Mr. Chair, Your Honor. So on the COVID cases, sir, since the onslaught of the COVID threat in March, we have a total of 3,486 confirmed cases, but bulk of those have recovered already. And right now we're down to less than 300, Your Honor.
Mr. Chairman, yung ating casualties dyan, yung Kia na namatay sa COVID, total of 9, 2 sundalo at saka 7 dependents.
Salamat, Mr. Chair. No more additional question.
Thank you. Senator Ronald Bato, gisay mo na yung mista mo rito.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Secretary Lorenzana, sir, lahat ng mga officers ng DND at ng AFP, aking mga mista, maraming kong mga mista na nakita ko. Sa lahat po, General Carolina, sir, General Mapago, sir, may Mr. Chairman, I just would like to diretsahan na ito. Gusto ko lang pag-manifest ng aking suporta dito sa proposed budget ng DND. Nagsusuporta ako, but
We lost you. We cannot hear you, Senator Bato.
number thing, sir, hello. Yan, sir. Hello.
Go.
Yan, sir. Marinig niyo ako, sir?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Yes, sir. As I have said, sir, a while ago, diretsahan na akong nag-express ng aking suporta sa budget ng DND. At meron lang akong, well nagsusuporta ako, meron lang akong tatlong request sa kanila. Number one, yung sa West Philippine Sea natin, sana huwag tayo magpapabuli sa ating mga kapitbahay, ating mga neighbors. Kung sila gumagamit ng mga paramilitary, mga civil, paramilitary para protektahan yung ating mga fishermen. Pangalawa, yung problema natin dito sa terrorism sa South, obserbahan natin padami yung information about suicide bombing. And kung talagang sigurado yung ating intelligence community na na-determine na nila na somehow there is a third party playing, third party supporting this terrorism in relation to our other problems, yung mga claims natin, then we don't have to be playing nice with them. We have to tell them frankly, and we must be honest with them how we feel about what they're doing. Huwag tayong palagi lang tayo mabait sa kanila. At pangatlo, yung problema natin sa NPA, sana we've been fighting this war very long time already, and alam natin na noon pa, inyente pa tayo si General Gapay, ang ating hinanakit noon. Sabi natin palagi na, Mista, parang ano ba itong gira na ito? Para pinabayaan na lang tayo dito ng ibang ahensya ng gobyerno. Parang insurgency is purely military problem. Yung DSWD hindi gumagalaw. Kahit na yung local government units hindi gumagalaw. Sumusuporta pa sa mga NPA. Yung ibang ahensya sumusuporta. Yung mga DepEd sumusuporta. Ang church sumusuporta. Pero ngayon, nakikita natin through LCAC, NTF-LCAC, nagkakaroon tayo ng liwanag na chance na natin ito, natapusin natin itong problema na ito. Well, long shot. Kung 2 years, within 2 years matapos na ito. But somehow, sana malaking dent ang ating mabigay dito sa problema na ito. Dahil na matagal na tayo serbisyo, ngayon lang talaga natin naramdaman na meron tayong presidente nagsusuporta sa ating efforts towards insurgency. So, i-maximize natin ito, gamitin natin itong opportunity na ito, huwag natin sayangin. Malaki talaga, malaking mangyayari ito sa problema natin sa insurgency. Although, sabi natin nga, patapos na sila, pababa na sila, pero alam natin na may mga nakapasok na sila sa ating gobyerno. They want to destroy our government from the inside. Marami na tayong nakapasok dyan sa loob na sa legislature pa ngayong iba. Dapat ating gamitin itong tsansa na meron tayong Pangulo na talagang sumusuporta sa ating effort. So yun lang po, Mr. Chairman, tatlo kong request. Alam kong they are with me pagdating sa mga kagustuhan na yon. Lahat man tayo, yun ang gusto natin mangyari. Yun lang, Mr. Chairman, maraming salamat. Suportado ko po yung budget ng AP at ng DND. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator De La Rosa. Would you like to comment, Chief of Staff and SND?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, yes. Noted Senator De La Rosa, no, Senator Bato. Yung West Philippine Sea, tulad ng napag-usapan namin kanina ni Senator Jaime, we will look into that kasi sinabi mo, naval militia ang ginagamit sa kabila. So maybe we should also develop our naval militia. For the suicide bombing, medyo effective na yung ating, nagiging maganda na yung ating intelligence yan. That's why we are already apprehending them one by one, itong mga suicide bombing. Now for the insurgency, I think we are making a big headway with our National Task Force to End Insurgency. Marami na tayo na-clear ng mga barangay, and the next step which we would strongly recommend or support is the development of this barangay, 833 barangays all over the country na na-clear na natin, so that maramdaman naman ng mga barangay na pag pumupunta tayo doon, hindi lang gira ang ating dala, kundi development lang. Development naman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, if I may respond.
Yes, please.
Sir, General Lorenzana, sir, ang request ko lang, sir, regarding yung sa effort natin sa LCAC, yung mga salugpungan schools na gigiba natin, sana mapalitan talaga natin yung ng real schools, yung totoo eskwelahan ng DepEd, para yung mga tao hindi lalong magagalit sa atin. Pinahinto natin yung edukasyon na binibigay sa kanila ng NPA, tapos ngayon wala tayong nilagay na alternative school doon na galing talaga sa gobyerno, so lalos na magagalit. So yun lang ang request ko, sir. Tutukan natin yung mga eskwelahan na yun. Lagyan talaga natin ang totoong eskwelahan galing sa atin.
Mr. Chairman, that's part of the principal object of the National Task Force. Marami na tayong ginawa dyan. I think part of the funds that we are asking is to improve some more our schools with meron po kaming coordination with the DepEd kung saan natin nilalagay yung mga eskwelahan na yan, at DepEd naman kasi ang magpo-provide ng teachers ng mga schools na po-put up natin. Thank you, sir.
Maraming salamat, sir. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Yun lang, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Bong Revilla is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nais ko pong ipahatid sa buong pamilya ng Department of National Defense sa pangunguna ni Secretary Delphine Lorenzana at AFP Chief of Staff General Gilbert Gapay ang aking buong pagsuporta sa kanilang budget. At nagpapasalamat din po ako sa ating mga magigiting na sundalo at civilian personnel na pumoprotekta sa ating lahat laban sa banta ng terorismo. At laging handang umalalay sa ating mga kababayan sa panahon ng sakuna, kalamidad. At ngayon ay frontliners din sa panahon ng pandemya. Salamat po sa inyong walang sawang serbisyo sa bayan. Saludo po kami sa inyo. Ngayon po, Mr. Chair, just have a few questions. Una po regarding Visiting Forces Agreement. Our country suspended the revocation of the Visiting Forces Agreement with the U.S. As reported in the media, the suspension will only be for 6 months from June 1 and will be extendable by the Philippines for another 6 months. Meron na po bang plano kung ano po ito at ito ba i-extend sa darating na Disyembre? Mr. Secretary?
Mr. Chairman, I have no idea what the President will decide when December comes.
Wala po ba kayong pakiramdam na kung ito ba ma-extend? So you have no idea as of now?
Wala po, Mr. Chairman. We have not discussed this with the President.
Okay. Regarding the intelligence fund of the agency, DND Intel Fund of 1.7 billion pesos will account for 35.52% of the 4.787 billion intelligence fund of the national government. To the knowledge of the AFP, what other agencies have this intelligence fund? Secretary.
Mr. Chairman, the intelligence budget for 2021 for the entire agency are as follows. For the Philippine Army, 444 million. For the PAF, 17 million. Philippine Navy, 39.749 million. GHQ proper, which is actually, ang ibig sabihin to yung ating ISAP, or Intelligence Service of the Armed Forces, that covers the whole country and provides intelligence to all the services, is 1.177 billion. B. PSG has 12 million, and for the DND, Office of the Secretary, a total of 33 billion for the DND proper. So ang kabuuan po nito ay 1.723 billion. Your Honor.
Yeah, just an interjection.
Yes,
Uh,
Mr.
Of
Chair.
course, 1.7 billion yung total agency-wide.
The
Distributed,
agency-wide. Yeah.
yeah, distributed to sa lahat ng agencies. The President has 4.5 billion. Ang tanong ko lang, are you being supported by or augmented by the Intelligence Fund or CIF of the Office of the President?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Matagal ko nang gustong tanongin ito kasi ano yun, yung discrepancy ba? 4.5 billion just for the Office of the President. And the whole DND, AFP, and other agencies under the DND, 1.7 lang. So I've been wanting to ask this, if the President is augmenting the intelligence budget of not only of the DND, the AFP, but also the PNP and other law enforcement units, would you know?
I know, Mr. Chairman, that the President, whenever he visits troops in the field, gives funds to the commander to support their intelligence activities. I don't know about the other agencies kung tumatanggap sila, but I'm sure the PNP is also
Well,
receiving.
I know for a fact that the other agencies
sir.
are also receiving
Yes, sir.
augmentation.
Yes, sir.
So that's the reason why I asked that, because kung titingnan mo on paper, sobrang laki ng 4.5 billion just for the Office of the President. And since he is the Commander-in-Chief of all armed forces, I was just, assuming that the President is also augmenting your intelligence budget. And now that you have confirmed it, that's good to hear.
Yes, sir. Thank you,
Yes,
sir.
Senator Revilla.
Okay, Secretary, the reason why I asked this, is this sufficient enough? Kailangan po bang dagdagan pa to fight terrorism dito sa ating bansa?
Mr. Chairman, we always require more than this one. Kaya lang, ito lang ang kaya ng ating budget. So we have to make do with what we have allocated to us. Kung pwede sanang madagdagan ito, ay mabuti po. Pero kung hindi naman, we can live with this budget and do the best we can. Thank you.
That's right, okay. So, okay, ito naman po sunod na tanong ko is regarding the building of cell towers inside the military camps. No? Napaulat po kamakailan ang pagtatayo dito ng telecom ng cell towers sa loob ng mga military camps. Marami pong nag-alala na marami daw itong maaari daw po itong maging bukas na daan sa pag-iispiya ng ibang bansa, partikular ng China. Sa atin, no? Posible po ba talaga na ang pag-iispiya sa ating bansa, particular sa military information ng isang foreign country gamit ang mga towers na ito? Posible po ba ito, Mr. Secretary?
Mr. Chairman, spying on others is always a function of many countries, and we are not exempted from being a target of this spying. Pero po itong mga towers po sa mga kampo ay pinag-aaralan po ito ng ating intelligence community. Hindi po naman bukas na bukas yung ating na pwede na nilang pakinggan yung ating pag-uusap diyan. Yung cell towers po na yan ay parang transmitter lang po yan ng mga conversations or text messages and everything from one individual to another para po mas malaki yung coverage. So kung pakikinggan po nila lahat yung mga pinag-uusapan dyan, mga chismis lang siguro makikipapakinggan ng kalaban dyan. There are other ways to spy on other countries not using cell towers. Ngayon, kung talagang ginagamit na yan, then even if the cell towers are not within the camps, ay pwede nilang gamitin dahil lahat naman tayo gumagamit ng cellphone. So they can also eavesdrop on what we are saying kahit na wala sa kampo yung cell towers, Mr. Chairman.
That's right. Maganda po na masagot niyo yung mga issue na ganyan.
Again, these are common towers, no? hindi lang dedicated sa dito. These are common towers.
Yes, sir.
Also,
The Smart and the
Yeah.
Globus have towers in our camps since they started their telco business in 1990s.
but the towers that being constructed now, dedicated lang sa dito yan or common yan to all telcos?
I don't know the program of the DICT, Mr. Chairman, but the one the program is common towers. Ang tower lang, pa nandun na lahat sila.
Yeah.
I do not know kung effective na yon or dito is also making putting up its towers. So palagay ko po yung DICT makakasagot yan kung common towers o
Thank
hindi.
you. Yes, thank you, Senator Bong.
Yes, does the AFP have adequate capability to even monitor and address cybersecurity threats to our country, especially during the new normal when we all shifted to digital platforms? Mr. Secretary.
Hindi pa tayo, you are still building up time and resources, then maybe 1 or 2 years pwede na nating gawin yung tinatanong ni Senator Revilla, Mr. Chairman.
So within, choppy po kay Secretary, hindi ko po narinig. Ulit po.
Mr. Chairman, sa ngayon ay hindi pa tayo masyadong develop dyan, but we are building up our capabilities to protect ourselves from cyber attacks.
That's right, Mr. Secretary. Kasi yan na po ang napapanahon ngayon. Iba na. Talagang nandiyan na. Sa cyber na sila, no? Sa online na. So yan ang dapat paghandaan nating lahat. Pag-upgrade niyang ating ng cyber assets ng AFP sa inyong modernization program. So it should be part of it. And one more thing, Mr. Chair. Siguro marami pa magtatanong. Mamaya na lang po ulit ako. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to give my full support to the DND family. Basta't kami po ay nasa likuran ninyo. Sa tuloy ang ating laban sa terorismo. At saludo po kami sa lahat ng magandang ginagawa nyo para sa bayan. Mabuhay po kayo. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Revilla. Moving on, no? There's a separate allocation under the DPWH proposed 2021 appropriation. Construction, improvement of various infrastructure in support of national security in the total proposed amount of 7.581 billion pesos. In the NEP, when DBM submitted yung late submission because wala silang details because these are all under lump sum appropriations, nag-increase pa ito ng 8.18 billion. My question to you is, how much of the 8.18 billion would be implemented in military camps or in the DND establishments? Meron ba kayo listahan?
Mr. Chairman, meron po. Ito, meron kaming isang...
So of the 8.18 billion, magkano yung sa military dyan, sa AFP and DND? Kasi understand, kasama rito yung mga police stations eh. Total ito eh. So magkano yung para sa DND units?
Actually, Mr. Chairman, ang request namin for the whole AFP is 28.7 billion. Ang naibigay lang is 8.2. 8.2.
No, 8.2, 8.18.
8.18.
Dedicated ba lahat ito sa military lang? Kasama pa ang PNP rito ah.
Mr. Chairman, can we just submit
Yes.
our detailed report kasi malaki masyado
Kasi
itong
these are
report.
not itemized ha. Ang unang pumasok dito yung 7.58, puro lump sum yun. Wala talagang items and we do not know, and that's why I'd like to ask you if you were consulted. If you were even consulted by the DPWH or the DBM kung ano yung submission ninyo so they could propose the necessary appropriations. Because I understand, kaya nag-increase to ng 8.18 billion, dumaan na to sa House. Yung addendum ng DPWH na sinabit, napasukan na rin ito ng mga augmentation by some congressmen. So I'd like to see yung list of the items under the 8.18 billion appropriations. But this is large in the budget of the DPWH. But all the implementation will be done inside military camps. And I'd like to know what are the construction, improvement of various infrastructure in support of national security. What does that mean? Kasi medyo vague.
Yes, sir. We will submit, sir. Submit na lang kami, sir.
Offhand, do you have a list?
I have a list, sir, here, but it consists of everything that we have asked.
Hindi, yung ano lang. Anyway, kindly
Oh.
submit. Ano?
Yes, sir. Yes,
Maybe
sir.
next week.
Yes,
Kasi
sir.
in
Yes, sir.
time for our plenary debates when we resume session.
Just on that, Mr. Chair, can I ask some follow-up questions?
Yes,
Yes.
Senator Don.
Just on that point, yes, can we go into a little more detail? You said, Mr. Chair, that originally it was only 7.58 billion in infrastructure inside military camps. Is that a correct recollection of what was said?
The description is construction / improvement of various infrastructure in support of national security. That's the item under the NEP in the amount of 7.581 billion pesos.
And it became, Mr. Chairman, how much?
It became 8.18 billion when DPWH through the DBM submitted the addendum. If you recall, di ba tinanong na natin sa DBCC na yung 396 billion appropriations, lahat yung lump sum. And that was September 9, I think, when we conducted our DBCC briefing. And September 7, DPWH through DBM submitted an itemized list of projects under the 396 billion pesos. Part of that is the 8.18 billion as increased from an original amount under the NEP of 7.581 billion.
So the increase is roughly 600 million.
Yeah, 600 million, Your Honor.
7.8 to 8.18. So so originally there was really an item of 7.58 billion, Mr. Chair.
Lump sum appropriations, walang items.
Oh, lump sum appropriation. May I ask the secretary, our secretary, if he knows about this? This is an original, according to Senator Lacson, there was really an item for 7.58 billion. Alam niyo po ba ito?
Mr. Chairman, we submitted actually for TCAS, this program with DPWH, nagsubmit po kami ng projects for all camps na 28 billion. 7.1 o 7.58 lang ang naibigay ng DBM as per NEP, pero hindi pa namin alam maibibigay ngayon yung priorities natin dahil from the 28 billion na projects na more than siguro to 100 projects ay we will prioritize kung ano yung importanteng gagawin natin for 2021, Mr.
So doon
Chairman.
sa 8.18 billion, hindi pa kayo na-consult kung ano yon?
Hindi pa kami na-consult kung ano
Okay,
mga details,
thank you.
Mr. Chairman. So we will sit down with the DPWH kung saan yung priority namin.
Paano naman tumaas ito ng 600 billion? Hindi nyo alam. How does this work, Mr. Chairman? Who makes a judgment that instead of originally 7.58 billion out of the original submission of 50 billion? Wow, sir?
Your Honor, that's under the NEP, Your Honor.
Yes, I know, under the NEP. But if the secretary is saying that originally they submitted for the NEP inclusion 58 billion out of that 58 billion out of that 58 billion,
28 billion, sir.
28 billion out of that 28 billion, only 7.58 billion was accommodated in the NEP. And yet it came 600 million more, or 8.18. So I'm just wondering, what is the process followed here? Apparently, the secretary doesn't know how the 600 million came into being, but we do hope that the report of the secretary will reflect the answers to these questions raised by our chairman. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Drilon. Would you like to respond?
We will find out, sir, kasi hindi namin alam kung saan galing, kung saan
Yung
papunta
600
ito.
million
600 million.
additional, sa addendum yon.
Addendum yun, sir.
Nung nag-addendum ang DPWH, nasobrahan pa. Kasi kinukwestiyon namin, bakit lump sum yung 396 billion? So, nung nagsabit sila na addendum, dinagdagan yung itong item na ito para sa national, sa security ng another 600 million. So, I can just assume na ito yung insertions, congressional initiative in the House. Because I understand that when DPWH submitted the addendum, I think in last September 7, in-itemize yung 396 million because of the request of the senators, some of the senators. But when they itemized, nagkagulo-gulo na yung listahan. So we want to find out, we want to get the details of the items as submitted by, anyway, dadaan naman sa atin yan na Your Honor, Senator Drilon, so we'll find out soon enough.
Okay. Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for that clarification.
Senator Risa Ontiveros, would you like to avail of your second round?
If I may, Mr. Chair, salamat po.
Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Taking off po dun sa, or continuing po dun sa dito present sa military camps na tinanong din ni Senbong Revilla kanina. So, Defense Secretary Delfin Lorenzana told members of the House of Representatives that he recently signed an agreement allowing the new telecommunication player to install cell towers within camps, similar to mobile service providers Smart and Globe. Though of course, Mr. Chair, ang Smart and Globe hindi naman inaagaw yung isla natin sa West Philippine Sea, hindi sila nagko-construct ng artificial islands at hindi rin nila binubuli yung mga mangingisda natin doon. Soon after, retired Senior Associate Justice Antonio Carpio likened the move to China putting up a listening device inside the Philippines premises, adding that the East Asian giant has the capability to install spy software and applications through the towers. Sabi po ni Justice, I think it's very dumb of us to allow those towers to be installed inside military camps. Just imagine putting a tower inside of the military camp and the equipment, all those chips on those towers, on these towers are made in China. They can just put in spy firmware. The software come from China. You ask any security analyst who's familiar with cybersecurity, and they will tell you absolutely do not allow towers to be installed in your military camps because it's like allowing China to put a listening device in your conference room. So with all due respect to the good secretary, Mr. Chair, hindi po ito chismis lang. Mga seryosong alalahanin, hindi lang nating mga mambabatas, pero dumaraming mga sibilyan, mamamayang Pilipino. So I'd like to ask, first of all, Mr. Chairman, good secretary, have funds for the safeguards that the military assured the public would be instituted so that security would be maintained. Have funds for those safeguards been included in the budget? And if yes, where in the DND or AFP's budget can these allocations be found? Also, Mr. Chair, through the committee, we'd also like to request a copy of the AFP's agreement with DITO, as well as its existing agreements with Globe and Smart, for purposes of comparison and contrast. And as the AFP had said earlier, they were open for the Senate to look into, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, unang-una po, hindi China nagpuput up, nagtatayo ng mga towers sa loob ng kampo. Dito is a Philippine company. Investor lang po yung isang Chinese company dyan, 40%. Now, the good senators mentioned about the systems that to be put in towers. Ang katotohanan po niyan, gumawa kami ng studies. I think Smart and Globe are also using Huawei, which is Chinese technology. Yung pong kanilang base or yung kanilang yung poste ng kanilang sistema ay Huawei lahat. 100% pa nga yung Globe tsaka, or yung Smart. So what is the difference between them and D2? Kung ang mga equipment na ginagamit ay parehong Chinese. We single out D2 but not the other two. Just because there is an investor there but Chinese, I think it is immaterial kung ang investor doon ay Chinese o hindi dahil this kung ginagamit mo Chinese systems, meron din silang capability siguro na pakinggan ano yon, maglalagay sila ng mga gadget sa loob para mapakinggan ng pinag-uusapan. So, Mr. Chairman, pinag-aralan po ito ng ating mga security people sa AFP at nag-ano pa sila ng mga experts, and it is very difficult actually for this company to eavesdrop on in the security operations of the IEFP all over the country. And we will submit the MUA to the Senate, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Secretary, Mr. Chairman. Well, as I mentioned po sa simula, malaking usapin na 40% ng dito ay China-owned. Kasi alam naman natin, yung mga kumpanya sa China ay effectively nasa ilalim ng control ng Chinese Communist Party, ng Politburo nila mismo. At meron silang national security law at meron silang national intelligence law na inuobliga yung mga kumpanya nila operating in any other country in the world na makipagtulungan sa kanilang gobyerno sa intelligence gathering tungkol sa bansang iyon at hindi sila pwedeng tumanggi. Alam po ito, Mr. Chairman, good Secretary, dahil, and I appreciated it then, sila mismo ang nag-raise ng concerns nito, ang DND at ang AFP, nung ang issue naman noon ay may mga POGO companies na karamihan ng empleyado ay mga Chino na malolocate malapit sa ating mga naval at saka air force bases. Itong tinatanong ko ay hindi lang malapit or mas malapit sa ating mga bases o kampo, kundi nasa sa loob mismo. And then yes, granted, Huawei lahat ang ginagamit ng mga kumpanya, pero so far walang itinanong na usapin ng loyalty ng mga kumpanyang iyon, not just in terms of the technology but in terms of yung yun na nga po kung saang republika sila kumikiling. This was not an issue. Hindi ito issue ng pagsisingle out sa dito. Ginrant na nga po ng Kongreso yung prangkisa nila. Issue po ito nung 40% ownership ng China sa kanilang kumpanya at kahit ganun ang kaso, yung pagpapayag din sa kanila magtayo sa loob ng mga kampo natin. These points, Mr. Chair, are not at all immaterial. They are very material. Lalo na kahit yung mga mas technologically advanced na bansa kaysa sa atin ay isa-isa, sunod-sunod nang nagbaban sa paggamit ng 5G technology ng China sa kanilang mga bansa. Dahil kahit sila nag-aalala na hindi mare-resist kahit ng kanilang IT capacity yung panghihimasok ng China sa kanilang information systems. Hindi lang panghihimasok ng isang kumpanya, kundi panghihimasok mismo ng Chinese Communist Party at ng Politburo nito. Dapat ay maging maalam at saka prangka, candid sa isa't isa tayo. Never naive, which I'm sure hindi problema ng anyone sitting in this hearing, with respect to China's intentions and objectives. Yun, kasi for the record kasi Mr. Chair, Chinese software and hardware, yes, are being used. We could still ask, are Chinese apps and VPN access to China being used by the employees? And then just to return to my first question about this issue, Mr. Chair, meron po bang fund para sa cybersecurity laban sa ikinakatakot na panghihimasok ng China sa pamamagitan ng dito towers sa loob mismo ng ating mga camps? Are these funds in the budget, and where there are they, Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Chairman, unang-una, yung investment dyan ng China Telecom is authorized by the Constitution. Ngayon, kung ayaw natin silang yung prangkisa, binigay na natin sa kanila. Now, if we do not really want them, we should follow the lead of some of the countries all over the world that banned Chinese technology from coming in. Siguro ay magpasa tayo ng batas na wag natin papasukin yung mga yan. Kasi kung legal naman ang pasok nila dito, I think it is after the fact na itong ginagawa natin, na kino-question natin yun, pero nung nag-i-invest sila, wala naman tayong sinasabi. Pangalawa, meron po tayong 500 million pesos to improve our cybersecurity capability na nakalagay sa ating Modernization Fund ng 2020. And for 2021?
Sa 2021 po.
2021 din. Another 500 million for 2021, Mr. Chairman.
Salamat, Mr. Chairman, Secretary. Sigurado, kaya nga naipasa ng Kongreso ang prangkisa ng dito dahil nagko-comply pa rin sa maximum 40% foreign ownership na iniuutos ng konstitusyon. Pero hindi naman iniuutos ng konstitusyon, papasukin natin ang isang kumpanya na bagamat may prangkisa pero alam natin 40% owed ng China na sa ngayon hindi kinikilala yung tagumpay natin sa Hague Arbitral Ruling, at gaya po ng sinabi ko, Mr. Chair, sa simula ay patuloy na nagbubuli sa mangingisda natin, nagko-construct ng artificial islands gamit ang ating mga likas na yamang dagat, nag-i-emplace doon ng mga equipment at hindi natin alam mga tao, closer and closer sa range ng ating republika and well within yung teritoryo natin na kinikilala sa ilalim ng UNCLOS, at inaagaw din yung ating mga existing na mga isla. Unprecedented yon, Mr. Chairman, good Secretary. Hindi yan ginagawa ng Globe, hindi yan ginagawa ng SMART, and of course, ina-uphold ko yung prangkisang ipinasa ng Kongreso para sa dito, pero hindi yun ibig sabihin na wala namang provision sa prangkisa na papasukin sila sa ating mismong mga kampo ng armed forces, which is our first and last line of defense laban sa foreign invasion in any form. Yun po for the record, Mr. Chairman. And I thank the good Secretary sa kanilang commitment na ibigay sa komite through the chair yung kopya ng MOA nila sa dito, gayon din sa Globe at SMART. So, kaugnay pa rin po sa cybersecurity and information warfare, Mr. Chairman. In 2010, Chinese President Hu Jintao publicly announced the importance of political work and the so-called three warfares or Sanjan to achieve China's core interests. Three warfares, as described, involves the conduct of psychological warfare, public opinion warfare, and legal warfare against an adversary's political leadership and broad population for the purpose of achieving information dominance. Facebook recently removed a network of 165 accounts, 11 pages, 9 groups, and 6 Instagram accounts originating in China, and focused primarily on the Philippines and Southeast Asia, including content related to the United States naval activity in disputed areas of the West Philippine Sea and the upcoming 2022 Philippine general elections. So ang tanong ko po, Mr. Chair, items related to information warfare in the DND's budget, meron po ba? Are any of these directives directed towards external threats? Since I understand from our earlier discussion, Mr. Chair, the military's objectives are not purely domestic, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman, sagutin ko lang yung unang sinabi ng ni Honorable Senator.
Opo.
Yung prangkisa ng binibigay ng Congress doon sa dito ay hindi naman, ang sabi yung pagpasok ng Chinese dito ay hindi naman allowed o hindi naman sinasabing pumasok, pero hindi naman pinipigilan. Wala namang nakalagay sa prangkisa na hindi sila pwedeng pumasok, kaya nakapasok sila. So siguro I go back to my original, my previous statement that maybe Congress should pass a law that will ban these companies from investing in the country. Doon po sa pangalawa, mayroon po tayong pera dyan. We have, sabi ko nga kanina, kasama na po doon sa 500 million pesos na budget ng 2021 to counter kung ano man yung cyber attacks na gagawin ng anumang bansa sa ating bansa. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Salamat, Mr. Chair, Secretary. Ito pong 500 million pesos para sa cybersecurity sa 2021. By any chance, may kasama ba dong mga long-range drones? Or I think it's more improbable, sea-going drones. Pero nandun na ba yon sa kahit aling horizon ng AFP in terms of cyber security? Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, hindi po kasama yung mga drones dyan. Pero kasi po yung mga drones, meron na tayo nabiling mga drones. Recently, na-deliver na nga po rito at pinag-aaralan na ng mga tao natin kung paano gagamitin. And maybe very shortly, we will be using them all over the country, including West Philippine Sea. Yung pong binili nating drones from Israel is worth 4 billion.
Infrared ba yan? Infrared?
Andun na po lahat. Infrared, kasama po yung infrared. So these 500 million that we are allocating for 2021 are only softwares and hardwares for cybersecurity, Mr. Chairman.
Okay po. Secretary, what about the possibility of a domestic drone development program na kasama yung mga Filipino scientists and technologists, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we are actually now capable of developing yung madiliit lang, yung mga ang kanilang loiter time sa taas, yung mga 30 minutes to 1 hour. But we have not yet acquired the technology that will carry heavy payload, yung bang malalaking camera, and can loiter around in the sky for about 24 hours. Nasa labas pa po yan. If we can bring in the technology, then I think our scientists and our engineers are capable to develop or make these drones, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sec, pagpadala niyo po nung maaari niyo po bang padala niyo committee ng specific details ng 500 million budget dun sa cybersecurity, including these drones, through the Chairman, Secretary?
We will submit, Mr. Chairman.
Salamat, Chair. And salamat, Secretary. And just lastly on the last word earlier of the Secretary tungkol dun sa dito. Oo nga po, hindi po pinipigilan sa prangkisa ng dito, pero hindi rin minamandato doon. And syempre, ang Kongreso naman, pagpasa namin ng prangkisa, we are also expecting na yung implementors sa executive ang mag-exercise ng that kind of oversight na wala na bang ibang mapagtayuan ng towers ng dito, di ba? Bukod sa ating sariling mga AFP camps. Yun po yung Yun po yung punto doon, Mr. Chair. Moving on po to protecting our Philippine vessels na binanggit ko po sa simula. Does the Navy or Coast Guard have the capacity to protect our fisher folk from the harassment by the Chinese Coast Guard and maritime militia? If yes, how much funding will be required for this purpose? And where can we include it in the budget, Mr. Chair?
May we hear from the POIC? Flag Officer in Command, Philippine Navy.
Sir, nakamute kayo.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Madam Speaker. As discussed earlier, the Navy is developing the capability for the maritime CAFGUs, or maritime CAAS, maritime CAFGU active auxiliary, for specifically for the Naval Forces Northern Luzon and the Naval Forces West. These are our counterparts to the Chinese maritime militia, and then they will be also patrolling the areas of the West Philippine Sea and Bajo de Masinloc. Specifically, aside from data gathering, they will also be protecting our fishermen as they conduct their business of fishing in our EEZ.
That's very good to hear, sir. Salamat po. How much funding will be required for this purpose at saan namin pwedeng pasok ito sa budget, Mr. Chairman? At saka sir, final na pangalan na ba niya yung Maritime CAFGU? Active Auxiliary. Maybe it may be just an aside pero medyo
dito sa Kongreso, sobra na sa numero ng mga kongresista, di ba? So, the last time I checked, ang Celebrity Sports Club ay hindi naman Kongreso. It creates a very, very disturbing precedent kung ang theory nila basta't may quorum anywhere they can meet. Then, that means at any point and any day, I can bring 152 congressmen and do whatever I want in whatever part of the country. Napakadelikado po nun. So, ako, simple lang po pakiusap ko. Don't throw the Constitution away. Don't throw the Constitution into the waste basket. Hindi po papel lang ang Constitution. Aspirations po yan. Vision po yan ng Pilipino. We took an oath. Whether the oath favors me or not, whether i-expel ako ng Kongreso na to, I still took an oath and I will still follow Congress. I think in one of these rooms, I faced an ethics case several years ago, decades ago. Kung ano-anong kasinungalingan, ngayon may fake session naman na ginagawa. No? So I'd like to emphasize, tomorrow we will have an honorable, orderly session. Look at the proclamation. The proclamation said, do the budget. Madali naman kasi tapos na natin second reading, nasa third reading na tayo. Mabilis tong gawin. Give us 2-3 hours to do the budget. Basta't yung majority to cooperate, ha? Kasi kung yung majority hindi mag-cooperate, kulang yung 4 na araw. Pero mag-cooperate lang yung majority. Yung minority, kung 30 sila, bigyan natin ng tig 10 minuto. O, di ba? Let's see how much time we can give each one of them. Diba? Matatapos po yan within 1 or 2 days. 3 days, kaya pong gawin yan. Kahit isagad natin yung special session. Pero kung manggugulo po sila, hindi po matatapos ang budget. As I said, it will still be on time because we will still send it to the Senate on November 4 or 5. And we will still have our third reading on November 16. But sana intindihin nila yung sinabi ng Pangulo. Ang sabi ng Pangulo, di ba, gawin nyo na ngayon. It gives hope to the people. So why would I argue? Even if I think hindi malilate ang budget, kung unsettled ang ilan mga senador at ang kabinete, although majority of them see the point, but there are 1 or 2 led by Sal Panelo who is, giving legal opinions that unang-una are not correct. Secondly, has no jurisdiction over the House. But still, just to satisfy all of them, mag 100% support tayo dito sa special session, di ba? Let me emphasize, tama yung sinabi ng Pangulo. In the end, no one will blame the House, the Senate, no one will blame Senator X, Senator Y, Congressman X, Congressman Y. No one will blame the BICAM. They will blame the President. Same in this House. In the end, no one will blame any of you. They will blame me. And right now, I Rat Pack Incorporated kayo. Di ba? Magwawala kayo sa ginagawa nyo ngayon. And then magwawala kayo dito bukas. Hindi mapapasa ang budget. Still sa akin ang sisi na mapupunta. Di ba? And I will accept that. But at least give me a fighting chance to we are friends. Sabi niya, yes sir. So sabi ko, are you for me or against me? We are friends. So sabi ko, that's why. If you tell me you're not for me, friends pa rin tayo kasi politika lang naman to. Diba? Speakership lang naman to. But if you're for me, I have to know. Hindi iniisip yung image ng ating bansa, hindi iniisip ko ano lalabas sa news ngayon. Ang iniintay ng mga kababayan natin lumabas sa news ngayon, ano ba naman ang budget? May ayuda ba yan? May tulong ba yan sa health? Paano yung nagpapabakuna ngayon? May sapat ba na pera na hindi lang pambili ng bakuna pero i-house to house? Sino pong magulang ngayon na gusto ipila anak nila sa health center kung meron po doon na may symptoms din ng COVID? Paano po yung mga gusto pumunta ng ospital? I had a friend a few nights ago who had a fluke accident na dapa. But because he's on the heavy side, medyo maaling ulo, tuguhan. Hindi ko talaga maiwanan, hinatid ko sa bahay niya. Dadalhin ko po siya sa St. Luke's or doon daw siya sa Makati Medical Center ang doktor niya. Ayaw akong papuntahin kasi baka magka-COVID daw ako. Di ba? Yun po ang dinadanas ng ating mga kababayan ngayon. Ilan po sa may sakit na nasa